Chapter 1792. Looking at the face of Michio's legendary general in the air, everyone from number 60 high school seemed to recall the black and white photo of this man printed in the history books in old antiques theory of cultivation class. So this is Mikoasi? He does look a little similar to the photo, but why does it feel a little different? He looks a lot younger. Liyue covered her little mouth in surprise. Although there had been youth-retaining spells in that era, there hadn't been any heaven-defying beautification technology like there was now. The black and white photo of General Michael ACI in the history books was an authentic representation of the general's all-powerful appearance back then. But compared to now, Michael ACI did indeed look a lot younger. It was probably because he had cultivated a youth-retaining technique or taken beautifying elixirs. After all, he was a legendary general. There was nothing wrong with cultivating him as an idol. In this era where looks were everything, having a perpetually youthful face seemed to be more popular. When all was said and done, not everyone had the confidence to be like Huashio's Blade Master, Battle Saint, and the other 8 great generals, who relied on their demeanor and unparalleled achievements to leave their names etched in history. The beauty of one's face could never conceal the brilliance of one's soul. Wang Ling didn't know how long it would be before he grew old, but if he really did grow old one day, he felt that he probably wouldn't use any other means to fix his appearance. He didn't have many requests in this regard to begin with. In all things, going with nature was the eternal and unchanging truth. It was just that not everyone thought that way. The modern cultivation world was very different from before. In an era of ever-changing profit models, even a legendary general like Michael ACI couldn't avoid becoming a tool to consolidate his social and financial status. It was true that Michael ACI was a genius, but if a cultivator's heart was tainted, it would be hard for him to achieve anything in the end. At that moment, the moment Myoxi transformed into the Golden Crow, Wang Ling and Wang Muyu simultaneously noticed that over 100 electronic eyes had surrounded them from all directions. These were the electronic eyes that Michael ACI had set up. He was confident that he could defeat the geocentric behemoth, so he planned to record it as video evidence to promote his reputation in the future. In the sky, the golden light that covered his body merged with the sun, as if they had become one. The blazing light finally condensed into a golden ripple in the center of his palm. Ripple sprint, tsa. Wang Muyu frowned. He could sense that this was a spell that extracted the flames of a star. However, Mikoxi's mastery of this spell was not mature. It was obvious that he had only recently developed it. Machi's current display was actually a way for him to show off his muscles to the world in coordination with the electronic eye. Looking at this scene, Wang Muyu muttered disinterestedly, "It's far from the ripple scamper." The true ripple sprint technique could cause the light waves emitted to be equivalent to the temperature of the sun's core. However, the current temperature of Michael's body was not even a third of the temperature of the sun's core. Perhaps he could show off his muscles on Earth. But in the eyes of a true expert, it was child's play. It could only be called the little sun fist. "Daddy, when are you going to show me? Let him see the real ripple sprint?" At that moment, Wang Muyu, who was sitting on Wang Ling's lap, transmitted his voice and looked at him expectantly. Wang Ling, even if he wanted to show it, he couldn't do it on Earth. He indeed knew this move of Mikoxi's, and it was hundreds of millions of times more powerful than Mikoxi's. But the problem was that if he used this move on Earth, the spirits of Earth might not be able to take it. Now, it wasn't just the spirits of Earth. The spirits of the other planets in the universe were very dissatisfied with their actions. Furthermore, many of them had written letters of complaint to the Heavenly Tao Governing Committee. It wasn't Wang Ling who was complaining, but Wang Ling realized that Wang Ying had great stamina. He used the planetary wall thumping spell on Sun Yinger at 8 o'clock every night without fail. "Evil creature, I'll show you my prowess today." At that moment, when Mikoxi had finished charging up his power, the blazing light waves in the air finally turned into a flaming dragon that shot toward the geocentric behemoth. Boom! From a distance, the flaming dragon that shot out of Mikoxi's palm looked like a walking laser cannon, which pierced through the geocentric behemoth's energy wall on the spot. "There's hope," as expected of General Mikoxi. Countless soldiers in the base cried out in alarm. Mikoxi's first attack had successfully pierced through the energy wall, which instantly boosted their confidence. The geocentric behemoth roared in pain after being blocked by the energy wall. It didn't die right away, but the thick leather armor on its body burned fiercely under the orange flames. The poor geocentric behemoth stretched out its little claws in an attempt to slap out the flames, and then rolled on the ground to douse them. Evil creature, no matter who summoned you, you're definitely going to die today. Mekaxi laughed. There was a hint of arrogance in his relaxed tone as he prepared to launch his second attack. Wang Ling felt that it was about time. He had his own plans. The purpose of summoning the geocentric behemoth was to put on a show. After all, this geocentric behemoth was just a cub, so it was normal that it couldn't withstand Mekaxi's attack. If Wang Ling had summoned an adult geocentric behemoth, given Mekaxi's current battle strength, he would probably have been beaten to a pulp. He secretly used his power of sight, and just as Mekaxi's second shot was about to hit the geocentric behemoth, he used the reverse summoning spell to send the geocentric behemoth back to the core world. At the same time, he used the burned skin of the geocentric behemoth to form a red orchid mark on the ground. All of this was done in an instant. It looked as if the geocentric behemoth had been directly blown up by Mekaxi's second shot and evaporated on the spot. When the smoke dissipated, the red orchid imprint on the ground entered Maishi's sight. This is... In the air, Mekaxi stared at the red orchid mark and frowned slightly. He felt that it looked familiar, but couldn't remember what it was. He then waved his hand to bring the nearest electronic eye to his side, and started to scan the image on the ground. Very quickly, an electronic voice rang out in Mekaxi's ears. Scarlet Orchid Association, may I remembered. This was the mafia organization from Griot City. It turned out that this behemoth had been summoned by this mafia organization. These damn guys, how dare they? He immediately faced the soldiers at the military base below. All troops, listen up. The soldiers swiftly lined up in a square formation in response. Mekaxi snorted. Pass down my order, purge Scarlet Orchid Association from Griot City. All Scarlet Orchid Association members are to be executed on the spot. Leave no one alive. But General, executing them on the spot, this seems to be against the rules. What do you know? Mekaxi said arrogantly with an awe-inspiring air of righteousness. Rules are meant to be broken. At this moment, in the name of Mekaxi, I have made a decision that goes against the wishes of my ancestors. This is for the greater good of mankind. To eradicate evil. Chapter 1793. Because of Michael Assey's sudden attack, the entire Tengu of the Wisdom Tree fell into temporary chaos. That lunatic Michael Assey, he's actually going to make a move on Scarlet Orchid Association. Doesn't he know that Scarlet Orchid Association is acting on behalf of the church? Furthermore, Levis is the representative of Scarlet Orchid Association to accuse Lotus Sunday. If he's killed, the accusation won't stand. As the highest-ranking Tengu present, Lord Ba, who wore the 8-star Jason mask, was also twitching slightly under his mask. He had always kept his cool and rarely trembled in anger. But at this moment, he had to admit that he was infuriated by Michael Assey's miraculous operation. What should we do, Lord 8? How should we deal with this matter now? Someone asked. Lord Mina took a deep breath and did his best to adjust his emotions. Then he slowly said, although Michael Assey is an out-and-out scoundrel, we can't directly clash with him for now. Generally speaking, Michael Assey wouldn't be able to interfere in this matter. He was the commander-in-chief of the main cultivation army, and the army headquarters wasn't in Griot City. Judging from Michael Assey's operation this time, he had just happened to be passing by and had come to the rescue. Lord 8 had never expected Michael Assey to actually interfere in this matter. Our Tengu has spies in the army, but Michael Assey is very cunning. He's always been on guard when it comes to counterintelligence work. Personnel in the army base are mobilized almost every day, and it's extremely difficult for our comrades to carry out their work there, said Lord 8. In fact, this was the reason why the Tengu hadn't been able to do anything to Michael Assey so far. They could even infiltrate the church, but they hadn't been able to do anything to Michael Assey's army. Moreover, Michael ACI was an exception. Although the church's authority covered most of the government, it couldn't reach Michael ACI. Currently, Michio's army only listened to Michael ACI. According to the Tengu's original plan, they had wanted Wang Ling and the others to drive into the army base branch and provoke Michael ACI. Who would have thought that they would go for wool and come home shorn? Instead, Michael ACI had set his sights on Scarlet Orchid Association, which was currently on the church's side and working with them. Come to think of it, why did that giant beast turn into Scarlet Orchid Association's logo after it died? This doesn't make sense at all. However, the Tengu were not in the mood to think about these problems. Their top priority now was to resolve the matter of Michael Asti and prevent the conflict from escalating. I made a mistake in this matter as well. I didn't expect my Koasi to get involved. We should ask our brothers from the church to inform Michael in advance. Master Ba, go and greet them now. I'm afraid it's already too late. Michael ACI has always been a proud and confident man. He would never revoke his orders. Then what should we do? We can only try to communicate with them first. At the very least, we can protect Levis and prevent Michael's forces from attacking him. Master Ba said with a headache, but this isn't a bad thing. At the very least, it was obvious that the battle sect had indeed sent experts over to protect them. Or maybe one of the high school students on the armored bus is Wang Meili. High school student? No way. Maybe he's just borrowing the identity of a high school student. Master Ba said, otherwise, there's no way to explain why such a huge beast would suddenly appear in front of the garrison base branch. Furthermore, after it died, its remains formed the shape of Scarlet Orchid Association's logo. Saying this, he couldn't help sighing. I underestimated these people's methods. This move of diverting trouble is very good. But it won't be so easy to sow discord among us and cause internal strife like this. It's time for Venerated Emperor's Senior Immemorial One to take action. Although there are only 5 of them in the first batch, it's already enough to give them a hard time. I want to see how this Wang Meili plans to deal with them. Under the accusation of the immoral navigation system, Wang Ling had been quick-witted to divert trouble and successfully set up a conflict between Michael ACI and Scarlet Orchid Association. If things had gone smoothly, as long as Levis was killed by Michael ACI, the accusations against Lotus Sun from the Glio government would naturally vanish like smoke. Furthermore, Lotus Sun wouldn't be the one to blame for Levis's death, and no one would think that she had ordered Michael ACI to kill Levis. Because everyone knew what kind of person Michael ACI was. What he valued the most was his reputation. As a legendary general of Michio Nation, there was no way he would listen to the orders of a big miss of a financial group and kill a mafia boss. Of course, Wang Ling still didn't know if things would go as smoothly as he had expected. Tengu had eyes and ears everywhere. It wouldn't be difficult for them to use some means to protect Levis. On the other hand, Tengu's influence had already infiltrated the church. If they wanted to completely resolve this matter, the best way was to break up the relationship between the church and Tengu, so that the church and Michael ACI would share a common hatred for a common enemy and turn their guns on Tengu. They just needed to watch from the sidelines as these people fought each other in their own territory. They were suspicious of each other and transferred their conflicts to each other. This was a living Western house of cards. Wang Ling had thought that these things could only be seen in TV dramas, but the truth was that they really existed in reality. Young heroes, where do you want to go now? I'll cooperate. At that moment, the Wicked Navigation asked. He was already afraid. Under the threat of Hirogua's USB drive, he had no choice but to compromise with number 60 high. In fact, it wasn't that the Wicked Navigation hadn't collected information on number 60 high before carrying out this mission. Back then, it had a feeling that these high school students wouldn't be easy to deal with. Based on historical observation data. In this half a year's time, Shadow Stream, Immortal Mansion, Devil Emperor Guapai, Yicha, all sorts of evil forces big and small inside and outside Huaxiao Nation had already been destroyed by number 60 high. It might not seem like it had anything to do with number 60 high, but in fact, everything was connected to it. Hence, the Wicked Navigation had thought that this operation wouldn't go smoothly, and that something might happen. In the end, it had been proven right. Sometimes, the analysis of big data was very useful. It was just that the wicked navigation hadn't figured out which of the people in number 60 high was the hidden expert. Now, it could only feign civility and surrender, and secretly gather information. When the time was right, it would send the information back to Levis. Chapter 1794. The wicked navigation took a moment to fill in the blanks. It thought that its fake surrender wouldn't be detected, but as an AI that already had the ability to think, Wang Ling would still be able to hear every single one of its little schemes. It wasn't just Wang Ling, everyone, including Wang Muyu and Lotus Sun, knew what the wicked navigation was up to. However, they were smart enough to pretend that nothing had happened. "Daddy, is this navigation system stupid?" Wang Muyu sent a voice transmission. To be honest, Wang Muyu was speechless at the Immortal navigation system. It was just a navigation system. Even if it was made into an anime, it wouldn't have any image. At most, it would just find a voice actor. But why did this wicked navigation system like to add scenes for itself? Wang Ling made a shushing gesture as a hint for Wang Muyu to stay put for now. Wang Muyu understood, then turned his little head toward the window and asked, "Where are we going now?" "Of course we'll act according to the original plan," Lotus Sun said, "and I just received a message that Yoshiko will be here soon." "Is it Miss Kamiya Yoshiko?" Li Yue was shocked and immediately complained. "He came to our class a while ago. She came in as a transfer student, but she didn't even go to school for a few days. I thought she dropped out." "I didn't quit school, but there are some things that I haven't finished yet." Lotus Sun smiled awkwardly. "After going to the mall, we'll meet up with Yoshiko. We've already agreed on the location." "Where?" Super-chan asked. "Glio City's landmark, the Starry Sky Tower. Opposite us is another landmark, the Wisdom Tree," Lotus Sun replied. In fact, she did not expect Kamiya Ryoko to take the risk to help her this time. But it was all thanks to Ryoko Kamiya. This was how he had helped her bring back something very important from Huaxiao Nation. That was the Gray Sect leader's token. Before getting up, even Lotus Sun herself hadn't expected that the Gray Sect's forces had already expanded to Glio City. Before she set off, in order to better manage the Gray Sect in Huaxiao Nation, she had temporarily given the sect leader's token to Ryoko Kamiya for safekeeping. And now, Kyuya Ryoko had brought the sect master's token over. This also meant that she would have the ability to control all the Gray Church members hiding in the dark in Glio City. The Tengu's intelligence network was indeed extensive. However, they had left out the Gray Church, an organization of cultured people established for the purpose of literary discussion. So what if it was the church? In this day and age, who wasn't a sect master? Lotus Sun already had a comprehensive plan in mind. It wasn't easy for her to travel abroad with Wang Ling. It was all because of Tengu that her plans had been completely ruined. This time, she had to wipe out this hateful organization once and for all. Wang Ling. The wicked navigation smoothly parked the car in the basement of Woolwolf Supermarket, but Fong Xing and Steward Lin decided to stay in the car. "Hey, Fong Xing, you're not going? I can freeload." "It's free." Hiro asked. "It's fine, I've already told Super-chan what I want to buy, and he'll buy it for me. The GPS isn't honest, so it's safer for Uncle Lin and me to stay here and watch over it." Fong Xing smiled, the same sunny smile on his face that didn't look out of place. He indeed didn't trust this wicked navigation, so he had casually given Super-chan a list in the car just now and indicated that Super-chan would buy it for him. "Don't worry, I'll buy everything you want for you." Super-chan thumped his chest and said. Then, the group got out of the car in high spirits. After several twists and turns, Wang Ling was finally going to buy the limited edition crispy noodle snacks he wanted, and for some reason he was a little moved. Woolwolf was the largest supermarket in Glio City, and at the same time, Glio City was famous as a cultivation technology demonstration city in Meishio Nation. Even the things sold in the supermarket were full of the aura of science and technology. After buying the "no one knows crispy noodle snacks better than me" gift bag, Wang Ling followed the others around the supermarket. "Little brothers, would you like to try out our latest product?" After installing the quantum fake eye, You'll get twice the results with half the effort. And most importantly, it can quantify your fighting strength. The female saleswoman introduced the product with a smile on her face. Then how do we use it? Don't tell me you want us to gouge out our eyeballs and put them in? Hirogwa asked. That won't happen, little brother. All cultivation machinery and equipment are dismantled and installed for a lifetime free of charge. There are related stores all over the world. You'll be able to use the lifelong security code built into the cultivation machinery and equipment to authenticate it. The saleswoman said, "This quantum artificial eye is the latest product from Shochong Technology Group." Madam, can you say that again? What corporation? For a moment, Lotus Sun thought she was hearing things. Shochong Technology Group, the work of teacher Shochong, a very famous scientist in Huaxiao Nation. I heard that the war sect had recently become a shareholder. This quantum artificial eye is the work of Mr. Shochong and a Mr. Wang Xiao Air. For a moment, Wang Ling felt like he was hallucinating. That was Shochong and Wang Ming. These two guys had definitely stolen the technology from the illusory technology city of nothingness. It was just that Wang Ling had never expected these cultivation machinery and equipment to be mass-produced and sold at the speed of light in such a short period of time. Sure enough, in addition to the quantum artificial eye, there were also a lot of new cultivation machinery and equipment on display on the shelves of cultivation machinery and equipment, including mechanical arms and legs and everything else. These things were very attractive to the new generation of cultivators, and Super Chen and Hirogwa couldn't move their legs at once. You said so much just now, but it feels like you still have to take it out. Can I try it out? Hirogwa asked. Of course. The female saleswoman smiled. All cultivation machinery and equipment need to be installed in the body to achieve a 100% effect. You can now experience it through an external device. However, the external device can only achieve a 20% effect. As she said this, the female saleswoman took out a helmet. I've already connected the quantum artificial eye you chose with the perceptual helmet. As long as you put on the helmet, you'll see what happens next through the quantum artificial eye. I see. Super Chin nodded and couldn't wait to take the helmet and put it on. Let me try it out first. Go ahead, little brother. The female saleswoman smiled as she helped Super Chin buckle up the helmet. After you open your eyes, the relevant functions will directly appear in the menu on the right side of your line of sight. You just need to select the corresponding function and follow the system's instructions. Okay. Super Chin rubbed his hands together. After the equipment started up, he only felt a quick hum in his head and then heard the electronic voice in his head saying, "Connection successful." A large number of functions related to the quantum artificial eye were swiftly displayed on the right side of the menu, just as the female saleswoman had said. Combat strength measurement, quantum speed reading, heat scan, extreme vision, supervision, one click to cast monthly vote, blink to beat Kushuang. Super Chen was dazzled by the dazzling array of functions. There's actually supervision? Super Chen was startled. Is this legal? It's legal in our Glio city. The female saleswoman smiled. Of course, this is a VIP function that requires members to top up. The specific effects of the vision are graded according to the member. King members have full vision. King members and below won't have very good vision. You still need to top up? Super Chin sked. Is there a free experience function? Yes, the combat strength measurement is free. Little brother, you can try it on your friends. Super Chin nodded slightly. Then, in the next second, he immediately focused his gaze on Wang Ling. The data showed that Wang Ling was at the early foundation establishment stage. Super Chin immediately laughed. Hey, Lingzi. It's been half a year since school started. Why are you still only at the early foundation establishment stage? Wang Ling secretly breathed a sigh of relief at this heartless mockery. It seemed that Wang Ming had already taken him into account when he had designed this function back then. Any scan aimed at him would be directly covered up with artificial data. This artificial eye isn't bad. After playing with it for a long time, Super Chin took off the helmet for Hirogwa to try. Then he walked over to Wang Ling and patted him on the shoulder. Honestly speaking, Lingzi, I always thought that you were very strong and just pretended to be weak. Now it looks like the misunderstanding has been cleared up. As expected, you're a mascot. Wang Ling. At the same time, a mysterious black shadow who was closely observing Wang Ling in the supermarket was recording something in a small notebook. The title of the notebook was written in a large font, Analysis of the Hidden Experts Among the Members of Number 60 High School. Below it was a list of the people on this trip. Fang Xing, Superchin, Hirogua, Liyue, Lotus Sun, and... That was right. When he had recorded the names, he had forgotten Wang Ling's name and didn't know who on earth this person was. This was why he had used 3 question marks as a marker. It wasn't until now that he had been observing Wang Ling in secret. Only then did he finally remember who this Mr. is. And now, he used his pen to completely black out these 3 question marks. Because just now, that Super Chen had already helped him eliminate one wrong answer. A mere early foundation establishment good for nothing. He wasn't worth their Tengu's attention. The error-free chapter of the daily life of the Immortal King will continue to be updated on the mobile game bar. There are no advertisements on the site, so please collect and recommend the mobile game bar. If you like the daily life of the Immortal King, please collect. The daily life of the Immortal King mobile game bar is the fastest to update. Chapter 1795. Shopping was always the key to stimulating the secretion of dopamine in humans, especially when it was free, when the secretion of dopamine would rise to a peak. When the number 60 high group arrived at the entrance of the supermarket with bags of all sizes, the cashier was first startled by the mountain of goods behind them. Was this F*** King shopping? Were they sure it wasn't clearance? The cashier was a little shocked, and it took a long while for her to come back to her senses, and she called several colleagues over to help her scan the barcodes. This incident directly alarmed the general sales manager of Volwolf Supermarket, and he immediately took command. They were very skilled, and after scanning the barcodes, they directly put the goods into storage bags one by one. According to Volwolf Supermarket's promotional rules, any one-time purchase of goods worth more than 100,000 yuan could be given a space storage bag repacking service, which was completely free. It took a full half an hour to repack the goods, and in the end, the total amount spent on the display was 269 million yuan. Miss, may I ask how you intend to pay? The sales manager asked as he tried to control his wild smile. I'll swipe my card. Also, I'd like to ask if I can directly buy your supermarket. Lotus Sun took out a crystal card with an unknown upper limit from her wallet. At that moment, everyone in number 60 high felt that Lotus Sun's entire body was glowing. That was right, her entire body was surging with a holy light, as if she was an 8-winged holy angel descending from the heavens. Naturally, Lotus Sun hadn't come up with the idea on the spur of the moment, but had been thinking about it for a long time. Guagua Water Curtain Group had already bought the largest chain hotel in Glio City, Velut. If they could continue to buy Volwolf, they would be able to advance in the hotel and supermarket industries together. Furthermore, once they bought Volwolf, Guagua Water Curtain Group would have an enormous export channel for elixirs abroad. Of course, Lotus Sun was well aware that buying a supermarket wasn't something that a sales manager could decide, so she had just casually asked when she swiped her card, and hadn't expected a reply at all. In the end, the sales manager said, "Well, I can't make the decision to buy a supermarket. But Miss Sun's luck is pretty good today. Our boss happens to be patrolling the store today. Miss Sun led her friends to spend a lot of money today, and our boss also happens to want to meet Miss Sunday." Also, saying this, the sales manager turned his gaze to Wang Ling and Wang Muyu. Our boss said that she knows these 2 gentlemen with dead fish eyes. Is your boss a man or a woman? Lotus Sun asked in a daze. Female? A woman? Lotus Sun immediately tensed up. At that moment, everyone from number 60 high looked at Wang Ling and Wang Muyu in unison. This time, even Wang Ling started to get nervous. No way, Wang Ling. Don't tell me Wang Muyu is you and this supermarket owner. Hirogua made a bold speculation. So, you really are Wang Muyu's father? Wang Ling's face instantly turned white. Stop teasing Wang Ling, look how scared he is. Li Yue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Who's your boss? Lotus Sun asked again. I wonder if Miss Sun has heard of Mrs. Lavin's name? The sales manager asked. It was only then that Wang Ling and Wang Muyu understood. It was the rich lady they had met in the coffee shop yesterday. At that time, Gullio City Branch Lei had also told Wang Ling that this Mrs. Lavin was a famous local producer of a cultivation variety show. It was just that Wang Ling hadn't expected Mrs. Lavin to actually also be the boss behind Walwolf. Here we are, everyone. In the end, this kind-looking sales manager led the people from number 60 high upstairs. Sure enough, Wang Ling saw Mrs. Lavin, whom he had met in the coffee shop, in the office on the top floor of Walwolf. Little brother, we meet again. You're really too cute. As soon as she saw Wang Muyu, she couldn't help feeling overflowing with motherly love. Perhaps realizing that she had lost her composure, Mrs. Lavin quickly readjusted herself. Ahem, please sit down. Someone quickly pour coffee for these distinguished guests. Yes, the secretary on the side quickly responded, and then retreated to work. After some small talk, Mrs. Lavin got straight to the point. As expected of the eldest daughter of Huagua Water Curtain Group, Miss Lotus Sunday. You are indeed generous with your money, extraordinary. Mrs. Lavin, you flatter me. To be honest, I'm also a little surprised. I only heard that you were a famous producer of variety shows. I didn't expect you to be the one running the supermarket business, Lotus Sun replied in a low-key and modest manner. Business has always been my strength. A person is destined to have many identities in life. In fact, even I didn't expect that I would become so popular as a producer of variety shows. Furthermore, I made a lot of money. Mrs. Lavin picked up her coffee cup and said with the calm elegance of a noble lady, I heard that Miss Sun wants to buy my Walwolf? Yes, that's a plan. Lotus Sun nodded. But Mrs. Lavin's supermarket only needs money. You won't sell it so easily, right? Miss Sun is indeed smart. Mrs. Lavin smiled. I don't care about money at all. Money is like floating clouds to me. Why would I want so much money? I can't even use it all. After enjoying life enough, what I want most now is to find some fun for the rest of my boring life. That's why I've embarked on the path of a variety show producer. Then, what are your conditions, Mrs. Lavin? Asked Lotus Sunday. Don't be hasty, Miss Sunday. Let me finish first. Mrs. Lavin said, a straightforward person doesn't beat around the bush. Miss Sun, you should be well aware of your situation now. The Church and Scarlet Orchid Association have taken action against you one after another, causing you and your classmates to be confined to Gullio City and unable to return to China. At this time, if I sell the supermarket to you, it's actually an act of siding with someone. Of course, what I'm saying to Miss Sun now doesn't mean that I'm afraid of these two forces. I just want Miss Sun to understand my sincerity. Speaking up to this point, Madame Raven slowly got up and looked expectantly in the direction of the number 60 high group. I only have one request, and that is for all of you from number 60 high to participate in the recording of a variety show with the elite representatives selected from another local cultivation high school in our Gullio City. As long as the recording is successfully completed, I'll transfer all my shares in Gullio City to Miss Sunday. As for the rest, I don't want a single cent. At that moment, Lotus Sun frowned slightly and said in bewilderment, I want to know, why does Mrs. Lavin like our number 60 high? Chapter 1796. I think Miss Sun and all the students present should be very clear on why number 60 high was chosen. Madame Raven covered her mouth slightly with her right hand, which was covered in white lace, and smiled. In less than half a year, from Shadow Stream, Immortal Mansion to that Devil Emperor Guapai, the destruction of so many organizations and experts one after another is inextricably linked to your number 60 high. To be honest, it doesn't have much to do with us. It's useless even if Miss Sun prevaricates like this. Number 60 high's reputation has long spread overseas, including in Gullio City. Elite high school students who want to cross borders to challenge number 60 high are eager to try. She smiled. If we hold a variety show challenge between high school students at this time, I believe that the ratings will already surpass all previous ones. I just want a thrill, and I hope Miss Sun won't have any other concerns. In addition, in order to ensure that Miss Sun and all the students can stay here and participate in the recording of this variety show without worry, I have also sent an email application to number 60 High as the producer of the variety show. Saying this, Madam Raven fiddled with the electronic wristwatch in her hand, and with a buzz, an email was immediately projected in the air. Old Chen's email. It even has Old Chen's school seal. At this point, everyone from number 60 High was dumbfounded. As you can see, the headmaster of your school has agreed to let you stay to record this variety show challenge. He has also applied for a 7-day holiday. Don't worry, the variety show won't take too long to record. 7 days is enough for us to finish competing in all the events. In addition, Headmaster Chen also made a request, which is to conceal your identities. I can also guarantee this. Madam Raven smiled brightly. Throughout the recording of the variety show, we will provide you with exclusive masks to cover your faces. You only need to wear your school uniforms to participate in the show. As for me, it's useless even if I wear a mask, because someone will definitely know who I am. At that moment, Lotus Sun sighed in her heart as she sighed at Madam Raven's methods. She was the future successor of Huagua Water Curtain Group, and now that such a thing had happened in Glio City, the whole world's attention was on her. Even if she wore a mask to hide her identity, it was useless. As long as she released information about Showdown High, even if she didn't mention her name, everyone would definitely know that it was her. In Lotus Sun's eyes, this was no different from directly reporting her ID number. No matter how the variety show was, as long as she was there, the ratings would be guaranteed. It was obvious that Madame Lavin had planned all of this from the beginning. Lotus Sun's only consolation now was that her face would be covered for this variety show, and everyone's attention would be focused on her, so it shouldn't affect Wang Ling too much. But even so, she still felt a little uncomfortable. She didn't want to cause trouble for Wang Ling, but now it seemed that this was completely the opposite of what she had intended. If we lose, it'll definitely be very humiliating. In comparison, Hirogua and the others weren't in a very good mood. Originally, they just wanted to travel abroad to relax, but they ended up participating in this variety competition for no reason. Headmaster Chen had personally signed the mail with the school's seal, so he had no choice but to go. Most importantly, this variety challenge was the focus of the entire world. If they lost, it would be extremely embarrassing. Therefore, in just an instant, everyone felt the pressure on them. If all of you are going to participate in the competition, what about me? Wang Mu asked. There was a little envy in his eyes. The little guy was at the age of a curious baby, and it was the time for him to accept and absorb all kinds of new things. An activity like the variety challenge was naturally very attractive to Wang Mu himself. Mu, believe me, this show isn't fun. Big sisters and big brothers are under a lot of pressure, Liu said helplessly. Really? It clearly sounds like fun, Wang Mu said. Don't worry, little brother, Auntie will specially arrange a segment for you. At that moment, Madame Lavin laughed sinisterly again. I've already reported this to Headmaster Chen. The variety show challenge this time was a 6+1 challenge format. 6 high school students and 1 elementary school student. The high school delegation from Glio City will also select a famous local king-level elementary school student to participate. Wang Mu looked puzzled. A king-level elementary school student? Is he very good? Madame Lavin, of course. The so-called king-level elementary school student is someone who can finish their cultivation homework on time, never causes trouble for others, carry their teammates when playing games, and never use their parents' money to secretly top up games, tip live streamers, or buy some other boring virtual goods. Wang Mu. Then, can a king-level elementary school student from Glio City blow up the earth with one punch? Hearing this, Madame Lavin couldn't help laughing. Little brother Mu, you really know how to joke. He's just an elementary school student. How can he have the power to blow up the earth? Wang Mu, but I can. Madame Lavin looked like she was coaxing a child. Yes, Annie knows you can. But you don't have to blow up the earth in this competition. You just need to listen to your brothers and sisters' arrangements. You're the key to getting points. Wang Mu nodded. Understood. Wang Ling and Lotus Sun. Saying this, Madame Lavin looked at everyone. That's the situation. It seems that everyone already understands. Then, I'll give Miss Sun the rules of the variety challenge later tonight. When the time comes, Miss Sun can give us a detailed introduction. All right. Lotus Sun sighed and looked at the number 60 high team a little guiltily. I've really troubled everyone by getting you all involved this time. Since we're already here, let's just take things as they come. Boss Sun, you don't have to be like this. We're also borrowing your light. In any case, we're all covering our faces, so it's not shameful to lose, said Hirogwa. It's indeed not a big deal if we lose. A variety show is entertainment in itself, and being funny and enjoyable is the first priority. Madame Lavin laughed. But if we win, there's an extra surprise. I can turn all the things you have bought today into gold. Super Chen was startled when he heard this, and immediately looked at Wang Ling. Then Lingzi will suffer a huge loss. He didn't buy anything except crispy noodle snacks. Madame Lavin, that's easy, I can just make a limited number of golden crispy noodle snacks. Even the pepper noodles will be gilded with gold powder. Wang Ling. Chapter 1797. After bidding farewell to Madame Lavin, everyone successfully met Ryoko Kwamiya in the Starry Sky Tower. Taking advantage of the view in the Starry Tower, Wang Ling saw Kamiya Ryoko stealthily find an opportunity to stuff the token of the head of the Grey Sect into Lotus Sun's hand, and then the two of them started to talk. Ryoko Kamiya, I think this Mrs. Lavin has a secret. She was also a businesswoman, and Wolf's business network covered the whole of Mishio Nation. Tens of billions of annual revenue, just for a variety show? That's too unrealistic. That's what I think too. Lotus Sun nodded. I didn't want to take it at first, but now the headmaster has agreed, saying that we're winning glory for the country. And he also said, Kwamiya Ryoko was puzzled. What else? Lotus Sun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He also said that this was the result of his comprehensive consideration. Because starting from our cohort, as long as classmate Wang Ling was in the competition, he would win all of them. That's why Headmaster Chin thinks that Wang Ling is a mascot, so this is a sure win. Ryoko Kwamiya sighed. There was no doubt that Wang Ling was a very dangerous mascot. This time, with all the forces mixed together, Ryoko Kwamiya felt that things would become more interesting. Where are you going to live next, Yoshiko? Is there any guarantee of safety? Lotus Sun asked. I'll be fine. Senior Qin Zong and Senior Xiang Yi followed me, and we got a free hotel coupon on the plane. We were now staying in a resort hotel on the edge of Glio City. The location was great, and it wasn't under the control of any forces. It's a blind spot. Kamiya Ryoko said, we'll settle down here so that we can intervene from the periphery to support you at any time. As expected of Senior Qin Zong, Lotus Sun sighed. Instead of worrying about me, you should worry about yourself. There's obviously something wrong with this variety challenge. Although I'm not sure what Mrs. Lavin's purpose is, you have to be careful, said Kamiya Ryoko. Currently, the Crimson Orchid Association is in conflict with the army, but there is no conclusion yet. After all, this operation was ordered by the church. I'm afraid that the church has already negotiated with McOxy, Lotus Sun said. I don't think it's that simple. Kamiya Ryoko said, as far as I know, based on Mishio's power, Mishio has a lot of power. When the church, the military, and the local forces were in conflict, there was actually a peacemaking organization that stood above the three. He had been sent by Mishio's Cultivation Federation. I remember it was called Heavenly Law Alliance? Heavenly Law Alliance? The Heavenly Tao Alliance doesn't belong to any city, and is directly under the head of state of Mishio Nation. For the sake of the head of state, these forces had to give him some face. Originally, we were quite successful in stirring up the conflict between the two sides. If the Heavenly Law Union intervened at this time and mediated the conflict, the Heavenly Law Union would not be able to deal with it. Even if they are united against a common enemy, they will still point their spear at us. Kamiya Ryoko rubbed her forehead, feeling an unprecedented headache. Now, Senior Xiang Yi has already prepared for the worst. He can't be thinking of, that's right. He had already extracted the photos of the leaders of the three factions. If he really couldn't deal with them in the end, he would be able to kill them. He can only be the bad guy. Kamiya Ryoko said, when the time comes, be it the church's pope or the Heavenly Tao Union's alliance leader, Senior Xiang Silver Bullet would be enough to blow their heads off. That night, the Snail Hotel where the people from number 60 High were staying was under martial law. The people in charge of martial law weren't sent by Huagua Water Curtain Group, nor were they local mercenaries, but the direct troops of Madame Lavin's force. They were white warriors known as White Demons. They wore light armor from head to toe, and each of them carried at least 2 katanas on their backs. On average, they were at level 6 of the Soul Formation stage. These white warriors were like hailstones after the spring thunder. They came from all directions and surrounded the Spiral Shell Hotel. Every guest who wanted to stay in the Spiral Shell Hotel had to go through a strict identity check before they were allowed to stay. That's too much. Outside the hotel suite, Super Chen and the others looked at the scene outside the French window. Even though they were on a high floor, they could clearly sense the busy figures of these white warriors dozens of meters below them. Who cares? In any case, we're already being watched by the local forces. Madame Lavin did this to protect us. Hirogwa spread his hands and said, in any case, didn't she promise Boss Lotus Sun that she would compensate the hotel 3 times the amount of the losses caused by the protection of the white warriors? Be that as it may. But Lotus Sun still felt vaguely uneasy. On the surface, it seemed that Madame Lavin's purpose in doing this was indeed to protect them so that they could smoothly film the next variety competition. But Lotus Sun had an inexorable intuition that Madame Lavin's true purpose wasn't that simple. Especially after what Ryoko Kamiya had said to her, she felt that Madame Lavin's purpose wasn't that simple. At the same time, under the night sky, Madame Lavin slowly stepped out of a limousine in front of St. Peter's Cathedral. We'll escort Madame in. Behind her, 2 white warriors appeared behind her in a flash. You don't have to go in. Wait for me at the door. Madame Lavin's expression was calm as she slowly walked inside the church along the red carpet that had been laid out to the soles of her feet in front of St. Peter's Cathedral with a snow-white cane in her hand. Enveloped by the moonlight, the glazed roof tiles were noble and gorgeous, giving off a solemn and holy feeling. At this moment, in St. Peter's Cathedral, Levis, the president of the Crimson Orchid Association, had already come out ahead of time. He was facing the portrait of the Virgin Mary with his eyes and half of his but on the wooden bench, praying devoutly. Only when he heard movement did he slowly open his eyes and muttered, "Lavin, you're here. And you didn't even bring a single guard in. You're still as bold as ever." As expected of the woman known as the Snow Princess Empress of Glio City. It's all an empty title given by others. Let's not mention it. Madame Lavin covered her mouth and smiled with her eyes squinted. Your Red Eagle of the Crimson Orchid Association isn't bad either. He's hiding in his cave and doesn't dare to come out after being scared by the legendary general, my Oxy. I'm just curious why someone who openly chooses a side would have the courage to stand here. Levis smiled. Choose a side? What side? Madame Lavin pretended to be confused. You openly mobilized the white warriors to protect those despicable foreigners. On the surface, it's to ensure the recording of the variety competition. But in reality, isn't this the act of choosing a side? At this moment, Levis revealed a sinister smile. Do you think the church will let you off so easily? Chapter 1798. Ha! Madame Lavin was fearless in the face of such a question. Her laughter that sounded unusually gentle had a hint of disdain in it. She said with confidence and calmness, I respect the Church and believe in the Holy Mother. The glory of the Holy Mother's existence will forever shine into the depths of everyone's heart and illuminate this country forever. However, this country doesn't belong to the Holy Mother, nor does it belong to any of us. Madame Lavin paused, opened her eyes and said, It's the same for this city called Glio City. We should trust each other and stay in our place. We shouldn't engage in a meaningless argument here. As soon as she finished speaking, A loud applause was reflected through the glazed tiles of the dome inside the bright St. Peter Cathedral and spread throughout the whole cathedral. A handsome man with long blonde hair applauded from the entrance of the cathedral as he walked along the red carpet. He was wearing a bright and beautiful military uniform. The magnificent shoulder pads were dotted with general badges, and the lapel on his chest was full of military medals. As always, he had a kind of flamboyance that belonged to Michael ACI. Well said, Madame Lavin. But now, it's obvious that someone doesn't want us to do this. Michael AI held the general's sword hanging on his waist tightly and said, "You and Levis are white and black. Instead of opposing each other, it's better to seek symbiosis. The church is the link that binds us together, so we don't have to go against the church." Speaking of this, he piously faced the Holy Mother and made a praying gesture. After all, going against the church is going against the Holy Mother. The three of us are not gathered here to divide Glio City. Michael ACI, I didn't expect an uneducated man like you to say such artistic words. How interesting. Since when did you learn to pray? I remember that you're not a very cultured person. Levis smiled. His voice was cold. Even in the face of Michael ACI, he was still fearless. I'm like this because of my daughter's influence. She's become more obedient recently. She seems to be infatuated with a literary organization and has begun to have an interest in learning. Michael A. smiled and said, I don't want her to walk my path like me. My path is not easy to walk. It's easy to encounter wild dogs on the road. Buzz. In the blink of an eye, the sword light slashed down and shrouded the church's glaze. The chair that Levis was sitting on was cut into pieces in front of everyone. Levis couldn't react in time and fell on his buttocks on the broken wood. Michael Assey's attack was too fast. He didn't even have time to react before he fell to the ground. Without a doubt, this was a form of humiliation. Just as Levis was about to curse out loud, he saw Michael Assey, who was standing in front of the Holy Mother's portrait, turning his head to look at him. His eyes radiated a faint killing intent that instantly poured down from the top of his head and into his spine. Levis, my tolerance for you is limited to the Holy Mother's face. If it weren't for the church, you and your Crimson Orchid Association would have perished. Next time, if you dare to talk nonsense again, it will be your head that explodes. His eyes were filled with killing intent. It was the gaze of a tiger staring at its prey. Levis sat on the ground, trying his best to remain calm. Just as the rumors said, Michael ACI had become even stronger after coming out of seclusion. If he hadn't held back with that strike just now, he might have lost his life. But even so, Levis's face didn't reveal the slightest hint of fear. With the support of an inexplicable confidence, his eyes met Michael Assey's once again. If my head can be personally removed by this legendary general, it might be a form of luck. But Michael Assey, can you really get rid of him? Levis laughed. Madame Ravin frowned deeply. This was undoubtedly a provocation, and it was done under such a great disparity in strength. Even Madame Ravin herself wasn't sure if she had a chance of winning against Michael ACI. Levis's strength was so great that he dared to openly challenge Michael ACI. Even with the church's support, this kind of confidence wasn't enough. Kill! Michael ACI was obviously infuriated. His eyes were deep, carrying an indescribable coldness and a dense killing intent. The silver sword light intertwined with the glazed halo on the dome and slashed at Levis's head in an instant. This kind of killing intent and aura was too awe-inspiring. Madame Ravin didn't doubt that Levis's head would fall to the ground immediately. Bang! However, in the next second, the moment when Levis and the sword light were about to intertwine, a golden bullet pierced through from afar. It burst into dazzling sparks and exploded like the sun. The light was so dazzling that it made Michael ACI and Madame Ravin's eyes hurt. A golden bullet accurately blocked Makoasi's fatal slash, saving Levis' head in the nick of time. Who dares to block my sword? Michael ACI was furious. He didn't expect his sword to be blocked at the critical moment. Calm down, General. I'm here to make peace. A squint-eyed man with ear-length short hair and a monocle wearing a dark blue coat slowly walked in from afar. You are. The sharpness in Michael Assey's eyes vanished instantly. He stared at the man and frowned deeply. He felt that he had seen the cloud pattern on this man's coat somewhere before. Heavenly Tao Alliance. The squint-eyed man opened his mouth and blew a wisp of green smoke that floated out of the gun barrel. He was the one who shot the golden bullet just now. That bullet contained immortal energy and was extremely powerful. It was a bullet condensed with cultivation. Since it blocked his general sword, it proved that this gun was at least a powerful world-defying artifact. Please don't misunderstand, General Michael Assey. I didn't mean to offend you. I'm not strong myself, but I rely on this Heavenly Tao spear given to me by the Heavenly Tao Alliance to have a say in this world. The squint-eyed man smiled and said, "Let me introduce myself. I'm the leader of Heavenly Tao Alliance's first team, Pei Luoqi." First team leader? Michael Assey frowned deeply. There were 6 teams in the entire Heavenly Tao. One of them had the most shocking strength. The leader of this team, Pei Luoqi, was known as the Heavenly Tao's Grim Reaper. Michael Assey had heard of this person a long time ago. However, he didn't expect this person to be this squint-eyed man with a strange voice and a sneaky smile. "I'll cut to the chase, General Michael Assey. I'm here to mediate," Pei Luoqi said. "Originally, I didn't want to get involved in this matter. Recently, my son has become obsessed with learning because of a literary organization, so I wanted to stay at home to tutor him. But now, you guys are fighting in Glio City. As the leader of First Team, I have no choice but to intervene." As he spoke, he looked around at Michael Assey, Madame Lavin, and Levis. "My Heavenly Tao spear isn't here to protect anyone. What I'm doing is to turn your conflict into a united bullet of justice. P.S. Who do you think the literary organization mentioned in the text is?" Chapter 1799. Here, it's always the fist that talks. Whoever's fist is harder controls the truth. Wielding the general's sword, there was a hint of excitement in Mike Assey's eyes as he stared at Pei Luoqi. He had long heard of the Heavenly Tao Alliance's team leader, and thus didn't intend to let go of this opportunity to compete. As someone who had just come out of seclusion and stepped into a new realm, Mike Assey was really curious about whether the Heavenly Tao Alliance's battle strength was as heaven-defying as the legend said. Easily, almost in an instant, Mike Assey unsheathed his sword and attacked again. Wielding the general's sword, his sword chi was like a rainbow as he moved at an incredible speed. This man was serious. The moment they sensed the dense killing intent, Madame Raven and Levis instantly retreated to the sides to keep a distance from the two. St. Peter's Cathedral was instantly overturned. The portrait of the Virgin Mary behind Mike Assey swayed in the gale, and the string was torn off in front of everyone as it floated into the distance. This was Mike Assey's unique madness. Once it got to his head, this legendary general of Mishio Nation would become an out-and-out lunatic. Facing the powerful spiritual pressure and the terrifying blade that was about to strike his neck, Pei Luoqi stood solemnly on the spot, far calmer than Madame Raven and Levis had imagined. Earlier, Pei Luoqi had claimed that he had relied on the Heavenly Tao spear in his hand to get to this step, but now that he was standing in the middle of the field and facing Mike Assey's sudden attack, he was as unmoving as Mount Tai, which was enough to prove how extraordinary he was. Clang! The blade accurately struck Pei Luoqi's neck with the sound of godly metal colliding. His body was unbelievably tough, and he directly blocked Mike Assey's sword in the most ordinary manner. At the same time, strands of purple chi seeped out of Pei Luoqi's skin and wrapped around Mike Assey's general's sword. Immortal chi? Madame Raven and Levis were shocked at the same time. They could sense that this purple chi was extraordinary. They had already sensed it when the Heavenly Tao spear had shot that golden bullet earlier. Now that this immortal chi was revealed again, both of them were horrified at the same time. Sure enough, Pei Luoqi, the Heavenly Tao Alliance's team leader, had already become a venerated immortal after Earth leveled up. Michael Assey's sword failed to cut off the head, but the expression on his face did not change much. He snorted, and then put away his general's sword. He stared at Pei Luoqi, who was still smiling with his eyes narrowed, and then said with a hint of coldness, "Why aren't you attacking?" I've said it before, it's to unite all of you into a single force to fight against the outside world. That's why I had no intention of fighting General Mikoasi from the start. Perugia replied, my original intention was to mediate the conflict. If I were to make a move against General My 11, wouldn't that be the exact opposite of what I intended? At the same time, I hope General McAvoy understands. After all, they were all fathers. And there is also a child who recently fell in love with learning. Boring. Upon hearing that, Maxi sheathed his sword. He didn't like Peroche. From the moment this man walked into the church, Mike Osti felt that Peroche's face had an indescribable expression that deserved a beating. I don't know if General Mikoasi likes me or not, but even so, the most important thing for us to do right now is to work together sincerely, to avoid being so discord by the same opponents. Peroche said, this time, I'm here to talk to all of you on behalf of the Great Pontiff. As he spoke, Peroche took out a beautifully framed jade scroll from his bosom. This is the Great Pontiff's handwritten letter. The Great Pontiff's personal signature and seal is also on it. Therefore, the result of my discussion with all of you is the final result of the discussion with the Great Pontiff. Why didn't the Great Pontiff come himself? Mike Osti was puzzled. The Great Pontiff is a person who loves to learn. Recently, he has been so engrossed in literature that he couldn't extricate himself. That's why he couldn't come himself. Peroche said, knowledge is the ladder to progress. The Great Pontiff is still as ambitious as ever. Madame Lavin walked over from the side. She had a smile on her face as she moved her slightly plump body. Her seemingly clumsy body was actually not slow at all. Mike Osti could sense that Lavin's and Levis's reactions had already surpassed what they had been when he had confronted Peroche earlier. They had also concealed some of their strength, and had improved even further than before. After confirming that Peroche was holding the Great Pontiff's letter, Mike Osti sighed deeply and stared at Peroche. You intend to play matchmaker for us, but we already have a traitor here, don't we? Hearing this, Madame Lavin was the first to laugh. General, there's no need to use such an obscure excuse. You could have just given me my ID number. That's right, I won over that Miss Sun and the members of number 60 high school to participate in the variety show challenge, and I sent my white warriors to protect them. But the truth is that this is the Great Pontiff's idea. This is the Great Pontiff's idea? This time, even Levis was shocked. Peroche smiled. The Great Pontiff's purpose in doing this is actually to get Lavin closer to those people. That's why he needs to make arrangements in advance, including creating a conflict between President Levis's Scarlet Orchid Association and Huagua Water Curtain Group and Battle Sect. But the nun he sent to my side is from the Tengu. For a moment, Levis felt that his brain wasn't big enough to process everything, but he very quickly thought of a frightening possibility. Could it be that the Great Pontiff is... That's right. Peroche said, now that things have come to this, I won't hide it from you anymore. The Great Pontiff is in fact an 8-star Tengu, and has an extremely high status in the Tengu ranks. The 6 high school students from Glio City who will be fighting number 60 high school this time were also carefully selected by the Great Pontiff. They are known as the 6 Great Child Prodigies. I remember, didn't you say that there was another child? Mike Osti asked with a frown. Peroche nodded. There is a child. And this child is the leader of our Heavenly Tao Alliance Team 2, Jiu Yun. He's very strong, but he was born with a childish face, and has always maintained a child's figure. This time, he will be the core commander of the 6+1 model. While St. Peter's Cathedral was secretly plotting the variety competition, student Wang Ling, who was also a father, was also discussing specific countermeasures with the people from number 60 high school in a suite at the Snail Hotel. Just half an hour ago, Lotus Sun, as the leader of the Grey Sect, had used the secret key on her token to post a set of coordinates on the exclusive Grey Sect app. She had urgently mobilized all the Grey Sect disciples in Glio City who could help, just half an hour later. In a private room in the hotel, a little girl who looked no more than 12 suddenly knocked on the door mysteriously. Lotus Sun opened the door. You are? I'm Micah Bay. Big sister, you can call me Little North. The little girl smiled. I'm here to look for the legendary leader of the Gray Sect. Chapter 1800. Micah Bay. A little girl in a light blue dress. She was clearly very young, but she had dyed her hair a beautiful pink curly. Inside the room, when everyone from number 60 high heard the girl's name, they all simultaneously associated her with the name of Michio's legendary general, Michael ACI. Superchin was startled. This is the daughter of that legendary general? She's actually a Gray Sect disciple? Everyone sucked in a cold breath. There were very few Gray Sect disciples who could find this location unimpeded, and Micah Bay was protected by her identity as General Michael ACI's daughter. Even if the white warriors at the door saw her, they wouldn't think that this legendary general's daughter hadn't come to the hotel to have fun, but to look for the leader of the Gray Sect. To be on the safe side, everyone from number 60 high prepared to act according to the plan they had agreed on earlier. It was true that Lotus Sun was the leader of the Gray Sect, but the eyes of the various forces in Glio City were very complicated. Without any in-depth contact, everyone felt that it was better not to expose her identity as the leader of the Gray Sect. Thus, when it came to meeting the disciples, they decided that Lotus Sun would stay in the room and remotely direct the operation, while the rest of them would take turns playing the role of the leader of the Gray Sect. Even the sequence had been decided. The first person to play the role of the leader of the Gray Sect was Hirogwa. When the door to the room opened, Micah Bay walked in full of longing. Her eyes were sparkling, as if she had embarked on a path of cutting-edge literature and was about to realize her dreams. Hello, Miss Xiao Bei, I am the leader of the Gray Sect. Then, with Hirogwa's greeting, it was like a basin of cold water had been poured over her. There was clear astonishment on Micah Bay's little face. She looked at the fierce-looking little fatty in front of her, and for a moment felt like her dreams had been shattered. You are the leader of the Gray Sect? What, are you very disappointed? Seeing Micah Bay's downcast face, Hirogwa was in fact also dealt a heavy blow to his heart. He hadn't done anything wrong. He had just been entrusted with the task of protecting Lotus Sun's identity as the leader of the true sect. In the end, he hadn't expected to be despised by the Gray Sect disciples in Glio City in the first round. No, I'm not disappointed. Micah Bay tried to maintain her smile as she shook her head. I'm just desperate. Hirogwa, everyone else, Micah Bay, the leader of the Gray Church in my imagination is a person shrouded in light. Not a person surrounded by fat. Hirogwa. It could be seen that after Micah Bay said this, Hirogwa almost couldn't sit still anymore. But for the sake of the bigger picture, the others stood in a row behind Hirogwa and firmly pressed down on his shoulders. The scene was indeed a little awkward, and even Wang Ling started to feel a little embarrassed on Hirogwa's behalf. Although Old Gua's body was a little swollen, he could actually be considered a nimble fatty. As one of the students in the elite class, he had also been one of the top students in number 60 high's PE exam. He had never been humiliated like this before. It was not scary to be despised by the people around him. After all, the more derogatory their words were, the closer their relationship was. But when a complete stranger came up and gave him a head-on blow, Hirogwa instantly felt a heart-wrenching pain, and he almost couldn't take it anymore. Perhaps realizing that he had gone overboard, Micah Bay's little face was immediately filled with smiles. I'm sorry, Lord Sect Leader. Actually, I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean a lot of what I said. I don't know why, but after seeing your face, I couldn't help blurting it out because it was so different from what I thought. It's fine. Hirogwa tried his best to remain calm. By the way, little Bay, since you saw me post the coordinates and come here, you should know what happened, right? Also, you should know that your identity is very special. Of course I know. Micah Bay said, my father is Michio Nation's legendary general, Mike ACI. It's precisely because of this that none of those white warriors dared to stop me or follow me when I went upstairs just now. They all thought I was here for a beauty treatment. A little girl needs beauty treatment? Hirogwa laughed. Of course girls need to take care of themselves, otherwise they won't be able to lose weight even if they want to, Micah Bay replied with a smile on his face. Mike Abe replied with a smile on his face, and these words made Hirogwa feel like he had been shot in the knee again. Let's not talk about this, little Bay. You know, I need your help now. No problem. Although I'm very disappointed with the appearance of the leader of the Grey Church, I'm still a loyal follower of the Grey Church. Your image in my heart is still that of a paper man. I just need to forget what you look like later. The leader of the Grey Church can only be what I see in my heart. Micah Bay said with a slightly yearning look in his eyes. Look, a speck of gray in the age. What a beautiful sentence. Wang Ling, Lotus Sun and the others, are you sure it's okay, little Bay? We want you to be our informant, and we need you to provide us with information on your father Mike ACI's movements. Hirogwa asked. Of course it's okay. My father never has time to accompany me, and often yells outside about how to become stronger and stronger. I can't wait for him to lose face outside, and it'd be best if he stayed at home the whole time. Mike Abe smiled and said, if only my father could fall. In that case, I could prepare a cage at home and raise my father in it. Wang Ling. Hirogwa, everyone else. Hearing Mike Abe's words, everyone from number 60 high was a little shocked. Sure enough, all the pink hair was black. This was too frightening. Who would have thought that the legendary daughter of a legendary general would actually be a sickly girl? Oh, little Bay, you've passed the interview, and I'll be counting on you from now on. I'll get in touch with you through the exclusive Grey Church app, Hirogwa said as he tried to hold back his cold sweat. I understand, Lord Leader, Micah Bay nodded, then waved at everyone in the room. Then we'll talk online. Then she directly left the room. For some reason, everyone from number 60 high instantly breathed a sigh of relief. Just receiving Micah Bay alone had already made Hirogwa feel like he had already lost half his old life. Can this person really be trusted? Hirogwa said doubtfully at that moment. I think so. Superchin said, her expression just now wasn't fake. She really wants to keep her father in a cage. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. He had only heard of benevolent fathers and filial sons, but didn't know that there was actually such a thing as benevolent fathers and filial daughters. Chapter 1801. Just receiving Mike Abe was enough for Hirogwa to feel tired, and most importantly, Mike Abe had actually looked down on him. Although it wasn't that Hirogwa didn't know what his problem was, even if he was a little fat, it wasn't like he'd eaten rice. So what if he was a little fat? Don't take it to heart, Volgo. Being able to eat is a blessing. Helpless, Liyue could only comfort him from the side from a girl's perspective. You have to believe that you're a nimble fatty. For some reason, it sounded like a good thing, but Hirogwa felt that it was an even bigger blow to him. When all was said and done, it wasn't his fault that he was fat, it was mainly a genetic problem. Almost 80% of his uncles were counted by the ton, so he couldn't be blamed for that. You've worked hard, old Gua. Watch me. Seeing Hirogwa's pained expression, Superchin naturally couldn't bear it as his brother, and he stepped forward to take over the role of temporary leader of the Grey Sect. Just then, another voice rang out from outside the suite. Hello, I'm Pei Xiaoyuan. I'm here to look for the leader of the Grey Sect. It was the voice of a boy about 14 years old. It was a little hoarse and immature, and it was a clear sign that he was going through a voice change that was common among young people. Liyue stepped forward and opened the door. A young man with short, black hair, a long braid at the back of his head, fair skin, and a pair of eye-catching, jutting ears immediately walked into the suite. He looked like an elf. He was wearing dark purple clothes, thin stockings, and a pair of black leather shoes. At first glance, it was obvious that he was dressed like a child from a rich family in Glio City. He exuded an air of nobility that made people feel like they could see him from a distance, but not play with him. Superchin sat upright on the sofa with a row of people from number 60 high behind him. He rested his chin on his crossed fingers as he looked at the fairy-like youngster in front of him, and deliberately said in a low voice, Hello, I am the leader of the Grey Sect. You're actually the leader of the Grey Sect? Like Mike Abe, after learning that Superchen was the leader of the Grey Sect, Pei Xiaoyuan's slightly surprised little face turned a little disappointed. What? Are you disappointed to see that the Grey Church's leader is a man? Do you think the leader of the Grey Church is a big sister and want to have a passionate relationship with him? Superchen said. Superchen had casually made it up, but in the end, Pei Xiaoyuan's face and ears turned red on the spot as Superchen's words struck him in the heart. No way. I don't want to date the leader of the Grey Church. I have no intention of pursuing her. Pei Xiaoyuan anxiously refuted. Everyone at number 60 high, including Wang Ling, was instantly struck by this reaction. Even Lotus Sun, who was secretly observing from her room, slapped her face as she was equally shaken. *CK. Look at this reaction. As expected, he wanted to date the leader of the Grey Church. Superchen just didn't want to repeat Hirogwa's mistake, so the moment the youngster entered the room, he decided to strike first. In the end, he hadn't expected his unintentional action to directly hit the youngster in the head. At such a young age, instead of studying properly, you only know how to think of such nonsense. Have you fully developed yet? You only want to date an older girl? Superchen laughed. Little friend, studying properly is the right thing to do now. There's no future if you mature too early. If you do this, your father will be very disappointed. If he wants to be disappointed, then let him be. I can't wait for him to be more disappointed. Pei Xiaoyuan said unhappily, that guy doesn't stay home all day. That's why I've decided to date a woman, marry her, and secretly have children to amaze him. Once he has grandchildren, I'm afraid he won't have time to work. That way, he can stay at home all day and help me take care of the kids. Pei Xiaoyuan gnashed his teeth and said, I've always fantasized that one day, I'll be able to lock my father in a cage with my own hands. He has no idea how hard life is for me and my mom. Everyone at number 60 high sucked in a cold breath when they heard this. Why were kids nowadays so extreme? This was already the second time, wasn't it? Why did they like to lock their father in a cage at the slightest provocation? In fact, after Micah Bei and Pei Xiaoyuan's second time, Wang Muyu actually had a similar idea, but unfortunately he felt that given his current strength, he wouldn't be able to beat Wang Ling at all. Forget locking his dad in a cage, it was already pretty good that he hadn't been sent here. Wang Ling, classmate Xiaoyuan, what you're doing is definitely wrong. If you want to make things difficult for your father, you just need to carry out our gray sex missions in secret, Superchen said. From your description, your father is obsessed with work all day, so he should be a big shot, right? What big shot? He's just a team leader in the Heavenly Tao Alliance. Pei Xiaoyuan spread his hands. Hearing this, the expressions of everyone at number 60 high instantly changed. The first one who came was Mike Abe, the daughter of General Mike Aca. The current Pei Xiaoyuan was actually the son of a team leader in the Heavenly Tao Alliance. How did they manage to develop two such excellent spies for a single set of coordinates? It was hard for everyone at number 60 high to believe that this was actually true. Everything was going too smoothly, as if the gods were helping them. Lotus Sun was also a little bewildered in her room. Her initial suspicion was that it was very likely that this senior called Qin Zong had sent a wave of luck in their direction, and this was the legendary purple qi from the east. But it was very obvious that Pei Luoqi was very secretive about the nature of his work, so Pei Xiaoyuan had no idea what on earth Pei Luoqi did. Pei Xiaoyuan gave a wry smile helplessly and said, I don't know what my dad is doing in that strange organization. How can he be so happy as a team leader? Isn't it just collecting homework? Everyone at number 60 high. Hearing this, Wang Ling couldn't help a drop of cold sweat running down his forehead. Collecting homework was fine. Given the nature of the Heavenly Tao Alliance's work, collecting homework probably meant that they were collecting heads. Then, do you think there's been anything unusual about your father recently? At that moment, Superchen asked, it doesn't matter how small the information is. Pei Xiaoyuan thought carefully for a bit, then said, that's right. I remember, it doesn't seem right. I don't know if it has anything to do with my father. Let's hear it first. Superchen smiled. It's like this. I noticed that every time my father left home, the Pope of St. Peter's Cathedral will come to my house to preach. Preach? Yes. Pei Xiaoyuan nodded and said, The Grand Pontiff said that my father is not at home all day because there are evil spirits in the house. That's why I brought the cross and holy water over. Every time, I had to work with my mom for a long time before I could use it. The number 60 high team. Chapter 1802. After chatting for another 10 minutes or so, Pei Xiaoyuan left. He had left to the consolation of the people from number 60 high school, even though even he himself hadn't realized what had happened. After receiving the message to go back and await further instructions, Super Chin gave Pei Xiaoyuan another signature from the leader of the Gray Sect, who was so happy that he almost fainted. The truth was that this signature had been signed by Wang Ling, and had nothing to do with Lotus Sun and Super Chin. Why are you looking at me, Lingzi? Think about it, Boss Lotus Sun was in her room just now, how could she have signed it? Otherwise, everything would have been exposed. You secretly signed the one she gave you. This plan is simply perfect. Super Chin gave him a thumbs up and grinned. Also, it's not like you don't know that Boss Lotus Sun has been imitating your handwriting all along. On the surface, there's actually no difference between her signature and yours. Apart from the few of us, no one will be able to tell. Don't worry. Wang Ling, no difference? Of course there was, and there was a big difference. Pei Xiaoyuan's father was the leader of Team 1 of the Heavenly Tao Alliance, and his family was so close to the Great Pope, Wang Ling didn't know if the cross and the so-called holy water would work. But this signature of his could really exorcise demons and ward off evil, and it was extremely lethal. I'm really sorry to trouble you this time. Madame Lavin has already sent us the information on the variety competition. Now, let's discuss how to deal with it. At that moment, Lotus Sun came out of her room and said this, her face red to her ears. From far away in the suite, she had heard Super Chin say in front of everyone that she had imitated Wang Ling's handwriting. This was tantamount to a public execution, and she was so embarrassed that she just wanted to find a hole to crawl into. She had no choice but to open the door and change the subject to discuss the variety competition. If he allowed this group of old men to continue expanding the topic, it might really get out of hand later on. Elsewhere, Pei Xiaoyuan's heart blossomed with joy when he received Wang Ling's signature from the leader of the Gray Sect. He never thought that the leader of the Gray Sect, who looked like a boorish old man, would actually sign such a delicate name. Sure enough, the Gray Sect was a place where cultured people gathered. Ever since he was young, Pei Xiaoyuan had loved Chinese culture, especially Chinese characters. He felt that they were the most beautiful characters in the world. During the conversation in the suite just now, he had spoken in Mandarin. Although he wasn't very fluent and had a very thick accent, it was clear from the conversation that this group of Huaxiu people at least understood him. Young master. Downstairs, surrounded by several white warriors, Pei Xiaoyuan got back into his black MPV. The butler had been waiting for a long time. I'm done. Let's go home now. Pei Xiaoyuan was in a good mood. When he returned to the bungalow he lived in, he saw the pair of boots of the Great Pope at the entrance. As usual, he could hear the sounds of chanting coming from the house. Ha, ha, Although Pei Xiaoyuan didn't know why the voice sounded so urgent, he didn't take it to heart. It was very tiring for the Great Pope to come to their house to exorcise demons, so it was normal for him to be short of oxygen when he was reading from the Holy Book. As usual, he returned to his room and obediently locked the door from the inside. He opened his little drawer and put the signature of the Gray Sect's leader into it. When Pei Luoqi got home, the first thing he saw was his wife fainted in the bedroom. She had an ugly expression on her face and was in a daze. On the other side was the Great Pope, whose clothes were disheveled. In that instant, Pei Luoqi's mind went blank. He didn't know what on earth had happened for something like this to actually happen. As the leader of Team 1 of the Heavenly Tao Alliance, Pei Luoqi did his best to suppress his emotions and calm his mind. He examined his wife's injuries and was surprised to find that she hadn't been defiled. She was just clearly a little frightened and dazed. Honey, what on earth happened? Pei Luoqi was full of doubts. The Great Pope, he protected me. Tears streamed down Pei Luoqi's wife's cheeks. You haven't been home all this time, and I don't even know how to tell you about this. Previously, when the Pope came to visit me and Xiao Yuan, he found a jealous ghost in our house. Jealous ghost? The great Pope said that this is a vengeful spirit born from excessive jealousy when it was alive. It grows stronger by collecting people's jealousy. This jealous ghost was a single dog when it was alive, so it couldn't bear to see a happy family. Speaking up to this point, Pei Luoqi's wife couldn't help crying again. And that jealous ghost has always wanted to defile me. If there's actually such a thing. Pei Luoqi was shocked and hugged his wife tightly. I'm sorry, honey, I should have spent more time at home. But what does this have to do with the great Pope? His wife sighed and said, when the great Pope found out about this, he also knew that the jealous ghost wanted to defile me, so he calculated the time that the jealous ghost would appear. He wanted to hide in the bedroom and wait for the jealous ghost to appear, then purify it. But the jealous ghost was even more terrifying than the great Pope imagined. So the great Pope he failed to purify it, and was instead attacked by the jealous ghost. Pei Luoqi covered his mouth in horror. He looked at the disheveled and dying great Pope on the ground, and there was an inexplicable complicated feeling in his heart. This was because the great Pope himself was not very strong, and he had obtained such a high position entirely because of his character and the spread of faith from all sides. Pei Luoqi was filled with regret. He should not have doubted the great Pope's character. He did not expect the great Pope to make such a huge sacrifice to protect his wife and son. So now, what happened to the jealous ghost? Pei Luoqi asked. His wife's face was filled with fear again. Before you came, you sent out a ray of holy light, and when I woke up, I heard your voice, but I can feel it. This hateful thing is still here. It's still here. Don't be afraid, honey. I'm already back. Pei Luoqi comforted his wife. Then, at this moment, the great Pope's body twitched, and he actually stood up from the ground, swaying like a zombie. There was a kind of madness on his face, and his body was mixed with a terrifying yin and qi that had never been seen before. Even his tongue had changed. Pei Luoqi hurriedly covered his wife's eyes. He saw that the great Pope, who was suspected to have been possessed by the jealous ghost, stretched out his long green tongue at this time, first licking his lips, then licking the tip of his nose. Then, he turned his gaze and suddenly attacked Pei Xiaoyuan's room. Chapter 1803. But why am I always alone? Why do all of you have someone you like? Even otaku can find a girlfriend in the end. But I don't. Why do you have a lady with such a beautiful voice to play games with you? She can even help you win. Why do I have nothing? In the end, I can only enter this old man's body. The resentment of this jealous ghost was extremely strong. After possessing the body of the Grand Pontiff, it immediately produced a strong spiritual pressure. Pei Luoqi knew that things were not going well, but at this moment, he could only protect his wife and share part of the spiritual pressure for her. Once he made a move, it would be easy for a loophole to appear, and his wife would be directly pressured by the jealousy ghost. However, if he continued to protect his wife, his son Pei Xiaoyuan would also be in great danger. Bang! Therefore, without hesitation, he held the heavenly spear in his hand and fired a golden bullet at the great Pope's head. This was an immemorial bullet that was a mixture of immortal energy and spiritual energy. It was extremely powerful. According to Pei Luoqi's expectations, this bullet would be enough to penetrate the jealousy ghost's head, but at the same time, the explosive power of the bullet would also destroy his house. His son Pei Xiaoyuan would also be hurt. However, in order to protect both of them, Pei Luoqi had no other choice. However, what Pei Luoqi did not expect was, this golden bullet did not penetrate the great Pope's head. Instead, it was blocked by a condensed black resentment at the back of his head. The powerful resentment energy surrounded the great Pope's body, emitting a green and black protective light. It was like an iron wall that wrapped around the great Pope. Don't worry about me. Go save our son. His wife urged, shaking Pei Luoqi's arm with all her might. However, it was too late. How? Pei Luoqi was shocked. Faced with his wife's urging, his mind went blank and he felt powerless. There was a loud bang. At this moment, the great Pope, who was possessed by the jealousy ghost, punched through the wall and appeared directly in front of Pei Xiaoyuan. His face was extremely ferocious, and his eyes emitted a faint green light. Pei Xiaoyuan was scared out of his wits. He was rooted to the ground and did not dare to move at all. This kind of pressure was beyond what a child could bear. "Run!" Pei Luoqi was extremely anxious. He roared loudly. At this moment, the great Pope stretched out his long tongue and was about to tie Pei Xiaoyuan up and lick him. However, in the next second, a beam of golden holy light suddenly appeared. This holy light reward was too sudden. It suddenly exploded from Pei Xiaoyuan's desk, and then the dazzling light immediately covered the entire room. Pei Luoqi couldn't see what was happening. There was a loud hum, and when he came back to his senses, the light of the holy light had already faded, leaving only the Pope lying on the ground with his eyes rolled back, smoke rising from his body. What was going on? Pei Luoqi was extremely shocked in his heart. The jealous ghost that possessed the Supreme Pontiff's body was shockingly powerful. Even his heavenly Dao spear. Not even world-defying artifacts could penetrate it. In the end, the crisis was resolved by a sudden ray of holy light. So what exactly was this? Thinking back to when the holy light shone, Pei Luoqi clearly remembered that at the moment when the holy light shone, his eye power couldn't see through the holy light at all. He was an immortal sovereign. A ray of holy light that even he couldn't see clearly appeared in his house and saved his child. "It's the Holy Mother!" Pei Luoqi's wife shouted excitedly. Because of the excessive shock, her legs were still weak, so she crawled to Pei Xiaoyuan's side. "Xiaoyuan? Xiaoyuan? Are you all right?" She hugged Pei Xiaoyuan, who was also frightened to the point that his face was pale. The mother and son huddled in a corner, not speaking for a long time. In the end, Pei Luoqi was the first to react. He composed himself and walked toward the Supreme Pontiff, who was rolling his eyes. After confirming that the Supreme Pontiff had no signs of life, Pei Luoqi frowned. "This is not good. The Supreme Pontiff is dead." "The Supreme Pontiff is dead?" His wife was stunned. Pei Luoqi sighed. Even if that ray of holy light was the Holy Mother's manifestation, the Supreme Pontiff died in our house. If this matter were to spread, it would directly affect the relationship between the Heavenly Dao Alliance and the Supreme Pontiff. Moreover, the Supreme Pontiff is an 8-star heavenly hound. I'm afraid we'll offend more than just the church. "Let's move." His wife sobbed softly. "There's no point in moving." Pei Luoqi shook his head. "With the Heavenly Hound's intelligence network, even if we move, they will still know our location. Moreover, acting rashly now will only arouse suspicion." He sighed. Outside, he was the team leader of the Heavenly Dao Alliance's first team. But when he returned home, he was the family head that protected this small world. Facing his wife and child, Pei Luoqi had no other choice. He half-squatted down and hugged his wife and son, Pei Xiaoyuan. He comforted them. "Next, our family will have to go through this together. I hope that you can trust me unconditionally. This is a hurdle and we have to get through it now. Then what should we do now?" Pei Luoqi's wife asked. "Next, I want you to think of a way to clean up the house. Don't leave any clues or evidence behind. At the same time, don't tell anyone that the Supreme Pontiff came to our house," Pei Luoqi said bitterly. He then looked at the Supreme Pontiff's corpse on the ground. "As for the Supreme Pontiff's corpse, let me handle it. Now, not only do I have to put aside the relationship between our family and the Supreme Pontiff, I also have to put aside the relationship between the Heavenly Dao Alliance and the Church." For Pei Luoqi, this was a huge accident. Everything seemed to have happened suddenly. The Supreme Pontiff's death was a huge bomb. If this matter was leaked, it would have a huge impact. And if outsiders knew that the Supreme Pontiff died in his house, all of Pei Luoqi's explanations would be futile. Even if he could find evidence of the jealous ghost, it would prove that the Supreme Pontiff was possessed by the jealous ghost in order to protect his family, but he could not explain what that holy light was. So there was only one way for Pei Luoqi to go. That was to do everything possible to disassociate himself from the Supreme Pontiff. And to cover up, he had to find a reasonable scapegoat. As the team leader of the Heavenly Dao Alliance, He originally came to mediate the conflict. But now, he had to use his identity to create a new truth about the Supreme Pontiff's death. After thinking about it, Pei Luoqi felt that there was no other way. He felt that in this situation, letting Michael ACI take the blame was the best. The error-free chapter of The Immortal King's Daily Life will continue to be updated on the mobile game bar. There will be no advertisements on the site. Please collect and recommend the mobile game bar. If you like The Immortal King's Daily Life, please collect. The Immortal King's Daily Life mobile game bar is updated the fastest. Chapter 1804. This wasn't a whim on Pei Luoqi's part, but the result of careful consideration. The great Pope's death had been an accident that no one had expected. If Pei Luoqi took the fall now, once the relationship between the Heavenly Tao Union and the Church was exposed, it was bound to disrupt the balance between the other forces. The Heavenly Tao Union's job was to adjust the sharpness of the various forces to begin with, so that they could form a relatively stable situation under the Church's control. Therefore, he definitely couldn't bear this lightning bolt. The remaining choice was to choose between McOxy, Madame Lavin, and Levis. Madame Ravin was currently preparing for the variety competition. In order to carry out the plan in an orderly manner, there was no way Pei Luoqi would let Ravin take the fall and disrupt the established rhythm. As for the Crimson Orchid Association led by Levis, they were already at odds with Mike ACI. He had come here to mediate the conflict between Mike ACI and Levis. If he were to let Levis take the bullet now, it would be the opposite of what Pei Luoqi had intended to achieve in the first place. So right now, Michael ACI was the only way out. Furthermore, given Michael ACI's status and legendary reputation in Mishio Nation, even if it was said that the great Pope had died at Michael ACI's hands in the end, the authorities wouldn't be able to do anything about this legendary general. Pei Luoqi thought that Michael ACI could only swallow this loss in silence. "Honey, can we really get through this?" Pei Luoqi's wife's voice was still trembling. Her heart was full of regret. She had never expected their happy little family to actually fall into this situation. "Now, all you need to do is to clean up the house according to my instructions. Leave the rest to me," Pei Luoqi said as he hugged his wife and son tightly in his arms. At the same time, he began to think of a comprehensive plan to shift the blame to others. First of all, he had to protect the great Pope's body. At the very least, he had to delay the great Pope's death and keep his blood circulating for a period of time to create the illusion that he was still alive. Of course, such a method was impossible to achieve under normal circumstances, but it was not difficult for cultivators of high realms. That night, on the cliff of Proud Wind Mountain in Glio City, this legendary general of Mishio Nation, Mike ACI, was sitting cross-legged. His consciousness was linked to the sky as he conversed with his friend from a distance. Such a stream of consciousness conversation would not be disturbed by outsiders, nor would it be recorded. It was a very safe method of conversation. "I really don't know what the great Pope is thinking. A mafia organization like the Crimson Orchid Society is completely unreliable. I, Michael ACI, have never suffered such humiliation. If he wasn't the Supreme Pontiff, I would have exterminated him as well." Michael ACI communicated telepathically. A burst of slightly aged laughter came from the other side. Right now, the two other legendary generals of Mishio Nation were talking to Maishi, Admiral Meng Qi of the Navy and Admiral Ai Kong of the Air Force. Marine Admiral Meng Qi quickly laughed after hearing the words, "Mike, you don't know this. For the Crimson Orchid Association to be able to be so arrogant in a place like Glio City for so many years, they naturally had some connections with the Church. It's fine if you just say it. After all, the great Pope's identity is extraordinary." Michael ACI sighed. "Just because he's the great master of a Yuan Venerate, he can do whatever he wants?" Admiral Ai Kong also laughed. "Of course he can do whatever he wants if he's the great master. But you have to be careful, Michael. You can't speak carelessly about killing the great Pope. If you mess up your relationship with the Yuan Venerates in the future, it won't be worth it." "I know, but after this, I'm going to make Levis regret it," Michael ACI said sinisterly. As Meng Qi and Lai Kong had said, Because of the interference of the Church and the Heavenly Tao Alliance, he could only give up on this operation to destroy the Crimson Orchid Association. But as a proud person, Michael ACI was always filled with hostility towards those who disrespected him. This time, he could let Levis off for the time being for the sake of the Church. But after everything was over, Michael ACI had already decided that as a legendary general of Mishio Nation, he would impose a brand new sanction on Michael ACI. West Wind Castle in Glio City, Mishio Nation. This was one of Michael ACI's properties in Glio City, and every time he came to Glio City, he would choose to stay here. After talking to the other two generals, he felt a lot better and immediately returned to West Wind Castle. His youngest daughter, Michael ACI, was still studying in Glio City and usually lived in the castle. For an old father, when he was feeling extremely down, the greatest consolation was perhaps to be able to see his daughter by his side. When the gate to the castle's front courtyard opened, Michael ACI swaggered in, sword in hand. "Where's little Bay now?" he asked. The maid sweeping the floor bowed respectfully. "Young Miss is playing in the manor at the back. The head maid is standing guard by her side." "All right." Michael ACI nodded. After learning about his daughter's location from the servants in West Wind Castle, Michael ACI made a shushing gesture, intending to sneak up from a small path. However, just as he approached the manor at the back, a strange, murderous aura suddenly penetrated him from under the shade of a tree. Is it an assassin? Assassins would occasionally launch sneak attacks on the general's residence. Of course, Michael ACI knew that the assassin was not targeting him, but his daughter. As long as his daughter was kidnapped, he would have the right and authority to threaten him. Therefore, when Mikoasi wasn't by his side, he found a powerful chief made to serve Mikoasi at all times. She was specifically responsible for Mikoasi's safety. That was why when Michael ACI felt the murderous aura, his first reaction was that the assassin hiding behind the tree was to harm Michael ACI while he was on his way back. "Little thing, your luck is too bad, you just happened to bump into me," Michael ACI sneered in his heart. Without the slightest hesitation, he pulled out his sword and aimed at the tree trunk. Swoosh! A large amount of blood spurted out from behind the tree trunk and splattered on the ground. After Mikoasi sheathed his sword, the assassin who was hiding behind the tree fell into a pool of blood. Michael A walked to the front of the tree expressionlessly, then turned the assassin over with his foot. When the assassin's face was revealed, Michael ACI's expression instantly changed. The Great Pontiff. The Great Pontiff? Why was he here? Michael's heart was filled with shock. He had just expressed his dissatisfaction with the Great Pontiff's decision to the other two generals and had even said that he wanted to kill the Great Pontiff. Now, the Great Pontiff had really died by his sword. If the Yuan Venerate knew about this, he would definitely be in deep trouble. Michael ACI broke out in a cold sweat. He did not know why the Great Pontiff would appear here, but judging from the current situation, the Great Pontiff had been killed by him. His general sword had a very special sword mark that could not be deceived. There's no other way. Michael ACI's mind was racing as he tried his best to think of a way to disassociate himself from the Great Pontiff. Then he thought of a very suitable candidate to take the blame, Levis. Chapter 1805. Making a move against the Church was something that McOxy had never imagined. Although he had talked about killing the great Pope in his conversations with his friends, what an adult said and what they truly thought were often not the same. McOxy was well aware of the stakes involved. His attitude toward the great Pope was perhaps the same as his old father's. Perhaps it was because of his old age and the fact that the great Pope's style tended to be more moderate, which was why he was very different from McOxy. McOxy was dissatisfied with the great Pope and would occasionally say malicious things like, "You old thing, are you going to die or not?" But when he actually met the great Pope, he was still very respectful. This was because the great Pope was the great master of Mishio's Yuan Venerate. He was loyal and devoted to his country and followed the Yuan Venerate's lead. Although he was arrogant and conceited, he had never thought of usurping power. As a legendary general of Mishio Nation, McOxy considered himself to be very professional, but he had never thought that he would actually walk down this path today. He had actually mistaken the great Pope for an assassin who had broken into his West Wind ancient castle residence and stabbed him to death. McOxy, who had never crumbled even when facing hundreds of thousands of enemy troops, instantly panicked and didn't know how he should face all this. If it was confirmed that he had something to do with the great Pope's death, even if it was found that he had accidentally killed the great Pope, the Yuan Venerate didn't intend to hold him responsible. But he would become the focus of the people's condemnation, and all the good reputation he had built up in his native cultivation country over the years would go down the drain. Of course, this wasn't the most frightening thing. He was more worried about his daughter, McOxy Abe. If something happened to him, his daughter would be implicated as well. Although the great Pope's realm wasn't high, he still had a lot of loyal followers who he had built up over the years through faith. But don't worry, Dad absolutely won't let you be implicated. McOxy made up his mind at that moment. Sacrificing Levis was the only way now. He had no choice but to do so. At the same time, if Levis took the fall, he could legitimately dispatch troops to get rid of the Scarlet Orchid Association as well. When the time came, he could act first and report later, directly kill Levis and bury the truth. He would not give Levis any chance to defend himself. Therefore, the most urgent matter at hand was to treat the injuries on the Pope's body. The real cause of death could not be covered up, and that sword strike of his was probably the fatal wound on the Pope. The stab was very deep, and the shape was special. Only the general's sword could cause such a wound. That was why McOxy had to create the illusion that the High Pontiff was still alive. He had to use some means to stop the wound, repair the sword wound, and replenish the High Pontiff's blood, so that the blood could continue to flow through his body for a while. Although he would have to pay a huge price to forge such an illusion, in order to preserve the current situation and protect his daughter, he had no choice but to do it no matter how big the price was. At the same time, in the backyard, Mike Abe was sitting on a swing with a book in his hand. The head maid looked in the direction of the cobblestone path and frowned slightly. The general is already here. Why isn't he here yet? Was it because of what had happened? Does Miss want to take a look? Don't worry about him. Maiko, Abe answered calmly. He might have run into the Great Pontiff on the way. Supreme Pontiff? The Great Pontiff is here? Yes. Mike Abe smiled. I saw the Great Pontiff coming here earlier, but he did not respond when I spoke to him. I only reminded him that my father would definitely pass through the cobblestone path to visit me today, so it would be best for the Great Pontiff to wait for him by the side. Do you think my father killed the Great Pontiff as an assassin? That would be interesting. Miss, you must be joking. The head maid wiped the cold sweat off her forehead and smiled bitterly. Assassins all have a murderous aura. If the Great Pontiff was here to see the general, why would he have such a murderous aura? The two must have bumped into each other and were having a conversation. Yes, that's true. Mike Abe nodded and continued to read the collection of works in his hands. Miss, you've read this collection of works several times, but why do you only read this one every time? You don't understand. Mike Abe's eyes flashed. It's like a speck of dust in this era. It's too beautiful. After the meeting at St. Peter's Cathedral, Madame Lavin and Levis found a private clubhouse for a private talk. The place was surrounded by the Crimson Orchid Association's mafia members and white warriors. Lavin, since there's only the two of us here, I'll get straight to the point. Levis crossed one leg and stared at Madame Lavin. Actually, it wasn't the Heavenly Tao Alliance and the Church's intention to protect me. Isn't that right? President Levis, why do you say that? Madame Lavin smiled. Although the Crimson Orchid Association is related to the Church, the Crimson Orchid Association is just a mafia that occupies some territory in Glio City. It's a dispensable existence. Levis said, it's just that this time, they happen to be dealing with the Battle Sect and the Huagua Water Curtain Group, so they used the Crimson Orchid Association as cannon fodder. Since the Great Pontiff is one of the Heavenly Dogs, it's reasonable for him to send someone from the Heavenly Dogs to negotiate with me. Of course, I also have to thank you. If it weren't for you, Lavin, we might not even have had the chance to be cannon fodder. President Lee, you must be joking. This was just a stopgap measure. Seeing that she couldn't hide it anymore, Madame Lavin said bluntly. What benefits did the church promise you when you mentioned this plan? Is it to directly take over my position as president after the deed is done? Levis laughed. Lavin, you've really made a good plan. If number 60 High from Huaxiao Nation loses this competition, not only will you not give up control of your wall wolf cultivation supermarket, you'll also directly swallow up my Crimson Orchid Association. Hearing this, Madame Lavin continued to smile. But from what President Lee says, you don't seem to hate me too much? Of course I don't hate you. Instead, I have to thank Lavin. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to see the sun rise tomorrow. Even if I hate you, I also hate the church. We've worked together for so many years, but they didn't even give us a chance. If it weren't for you. At this point, Levis's eyes were red as he gnashed his teeth and said, if I had the chance, I really wanted to kill that old thing and stir up a reign of terror in St. Peter. Chapter 1806. It didn't feel good to be used as a chess piece. Ever since Levis became the president of the Crimson Orchid Association and started working with the church, he had imagined how the church would deal with him if they felt that he was useless one day. He thought that the church would be as kind as the Virgin Mary and talk about martial ethics, but he didn't expect that abandoning the entire Crimson Orchid Association was still the church's first choice when faced with related problems. If it wasn't for Levine, Levis felt that he would have become a rotten corpse that was casually abandoned in a hidden corner of the street and slowly turned into bones that would be eaten by the stray dogs in Glio City. Thus, Levis now. He hated. He really wanted to kill the great pope. If he really did it, it might be possible. Because the great pope's realm was not strong, but because of his identity and the protection of masters, it was rare for the great pope to leave alone. He might only let his guard down when he entered a friend's house. But who were the great pope's friends? Just a few hours ago, the arrogant My ACI was one, and Team 1 leader Pei Luoqi of the Heavenly Tao Alliance was another. With these two peerless masters as friends, he naturally didn't have to worry about his safety when he went to their houses. So to sum up, there were very few chances to find the great pope alone. Levis was well aware of the stakes involved. Admittedly, he was just thinking about it to relieve the anger in his heart, and he was not really going to kill the old man. President Lee, you don't have to be so angry. Our sincere cooperation is the way of the king. Madame Lavin smiled again. Her rich and meaty face seemed very elastic when she smiled. Levis could only smile bitterly. When he first saw Lavin, he felt that this woman who hid a dagger in her smile was not easy to deal with, but he didn't expect her to be so scheming. These years, she had been running a large supermarket chain under the guise of a variety show producer. It seemed like she was doing legitimate business, but she was actually running a variety of illegal businesses. Levis looked at the white warriors who stood solemnly around him and felt a deep sense of irony. Forget it. The current situation was not in his favor. He could only think of a way to make a concession first and then come up with a long-term plan. He, Levis, would take back what belonged to him sooner or later. With that in mind, Levis took the initiative to stand up and extended his hand in a gentlemanly manner. Well then, Madame Lavin, I hope that we can cooperate sincerely in the future. He tried his best to hide the sharpness in his eyes and lowered his head. At this time, Raven also reached out and shook hands with Levis. President Lee is indeed a smart person. Sincere cooperation. Whether it's the Huagua Water Curtain Group or the Battle Sect, we'll wipe them out in one fell swoop. On the way back to the villa, Levis had a headache. He poured himself a glass of tequila and walked to the sliding glass in the living room, looking at the bright moon outside the window. Looking up at the starry sky and thinking about life was something Levis often did. His peripheral vision swept across the courtyard that seemed to be covered by a layer of white muslin. Suddenly, he caught sight of a white figure. This white figure was hiding behind a shrub in the courtyard, as if he was ambushing something. The first thing he thought of was Raven's white warriors. 7. Levis was so angry that he crushed the glass in his hand into powder. On the surface, they said that they were cooperating sincerely, but in reality, They had sent a white warrior to follow him to his home to kill him? Levis was furious. He channeled spiritual power in his palm and condensed it into the shape of a blade. Then he threw it forward. The speed was so fast that the white warrior in front of him had no time to react. This small flying knife formed from spiritual power directly pierced through the white warrior's head. Levis was determined to kill and did not leave any leeway. Even if Raven found out, he was not afraid. It was against the law to trespass into his residence without his permission. Levis thought it was ridiculous. He was the leader of the largest mafia organization in Glio City. He did not expect that he would have to protect himself from the perspective of the law at this time. If he had not chosen to walk the path of the Crimson Orchid Society's president and instead become a law-abiding citizen, even if his life was worse than now, he would at least be able to live a stable life, right? Levis sighed in his heart. He pressed a button to open the sliding door to the courtyard and slowly walked toward the white warrior's corpse. At this time, Levis had already prepared the corpse-decomposing water. This was one of the common methods of the mafia. It was to erase everything without leaving any traces after such an accident. Just as he was about to dump the corpse, he suddenly realized that the face of the corpse seemed a little familiar. Levis's mind went blank. Then he was completely stunned. At this time, his mind was like a thunderclap, and he could not figure out why the great Pope would appear in his courtyard in the clothes of a white warrior, but one thing was certain. He had already killed the great Pope, and he had used a flying knife formed from spiritual power to pierce through the head. As long as the spiritual power gene molecules were extracted during the autopsy and compared with his own, he would not be able to escape the punishment of a Yuan Venerate. How could this be? Levis took a few steps back and sat paralyzed on the ground. Even though he had seen his fair share of spectacles, and had even threatened to kill the worst old man in the church, Levis's mind was in a mess when the Grand Pontiff really died in front of him. He was at a loss as to what to do. There were too few people he could trust now. He could not trust the church, Lavin, Michael ACI, and the Heavenly Tao Union. They were all on the side of the great Pope. He was the weakest party, so he would not be able to frame them even if he wanted to. Moreover, his cultivation level was too low compared to the others. The key to framing someone was to make everything real. In other words, if the great Pope had died in the hands of those people, it would be very easy for them to frame him. However, it was simply unrealistic for him to turn the tables and shift the blame. What to do? At this time, only these 3 words were left in Levis's mind. He also did not know what to do. After sitting in a daze for a while, Levis could only think of one solution. That was to use the corpse of the great Pope as a proof of allegiance and form an alliance with the Huagua Water Curtain Group and the Battle Sect. But the other party might not be willing to accept such a cooperation, because once the 2 parties were connected, the death of the great Pope would directly become a huge diplomatic problem between the cultivation countries. Chapter 1807. Defecting to the enemy midway was something Levis had never imagined. He didn't know if he was doing the right thing, but he analyzed the current situation. Given that he couldn't trust Michael ACI, Raven, and the church that had wanted to separate him from the very beginning, working with Huagua Water Curtain Group and Battle Sect seemed to be the only correct path. As for framing number 60 high, Levis felt that he didn't have the ability to cover all aspects at the moment. Furthermore, he didn't have the ability to make the already dead great Pope fall back into that state of suspended animation. If he did that, Battle Sect would definitely be able to find some clues as to how he had done it. Furthermore, if he put the blame on number 60 high for the great Pope's death, it might directly trigger a war between 2 cultivation countries. This was also one of the paths that Levis had never considered. Although he had used the truck driver to frame the eldest miss of Huagua Water Curtain Group for his subordinate Mei Li's death, in the end, it was just a small matter. If one Mei Li fell, thousands of Mei Lis would rise again, but the great Pope was different. He was the backbone of faith in Michio, a huge cultivation country. If he collapsed, the consequences would be very hard to predict. In short, starting a war wasn't something Levis wanted to see. His original intention had only been to suppress Huagua Water Curtain Group and Battle Sect and restrict their development. He hadn't really wanted to crush them to death with one blow. Because from a businessman's point of view, money still had to be earned. With material goods as a condition, the body would always be more honest than the mouth. Once a war broke out, it would always be the people of the two cultivation countries who would suffer. Without a stable living environment, how could they earn money at ease? After quickly packing up the great Pope's body, Levis put it in a huge fridge, and then put the fridge into his space with a storage bag. By the time he was done, it was already early in the morning. He could only talk to Lotus Sun now, so he had to go to number 60 High's hotel, and he had to do it under the cover of night. Otherwise, it would be too conspicuous to move a corpse on the road. Levis was in the car. He had just driven out of his villa when he saw through the rearview mirror that someone was actually chasing him at a very high speed. Who sent this person? Levis instantly became nervous. A very strong murderous aura. It spread all the way to the back of his neck. It made his hair stand on end. At the same time, he slammed on the accelerator and increased the horsepower to the maximum. At the same time, he pressed the button on the car's wings and rushed straight into the sky. However, the person chasing him did not give up and directly took out his spiritual sword and followed behind him. Only then did Levis realize that there was more than one person chasing him. From all directions, the black-clothed men who were chasing after him formed an encirclement, as if they had planned this beforehand. What were these people trying to do? Could it be that he had already discovered that he had killed the great Pope? But this was too much of a coincidence. How was this possible? He had just killed the great pontiff, and now he was being targeted by a group of people? As he was fleeing for his life, Levis's brain was working at the same time. The only possibility he could think of was that this might really be a trap. A plot to put him to death, damn it. He controlled the steering wheel and did all kinds of extreme maneuvers in the air. Behind him, a dozen black-clothed men stepped on their spirit swords and turned into meteors as they followed closely behind. This kind of speed was almost as fast as a car. It was extremely exaggerated. At this time, Levis felt as if he was being targeted by a pack of hungry wolves. Moreover, it was a pack of hungry wolves that had been starving for a few days. They rushed forward recklessly, looking as if they would not stop until they caught up with him. Levis gritted his teeth. When the car drove to the fairy lake in Glio City, he directly plunged into the lake. Under the water, no matter how high one's realm was, one's movement would be limited to a certain extent. However, what made Levis extremely horrified was, at the bottom of the fairy lake, there were actually people waiting for him. Just like the black-clothed men who were chasing him, once they saw Levis diving into the lake, they directly waved the spirit swords in their hands. The golden blades of light instantly slashed across the bottom of the lake, forming a splitting force. They surrounded his car from all directions and instantly cut it into several pieces. Then, under the lake, a huge explosion occurred in Levis's car. This was caused by the deflagration of the spirit stones in the car after the energy was ignited, and a huge water column rushed up from the lake surface. Covered in blood from the explosion, Levis used all his strength to escape from the lake, and crawled ashore in an extremely sorry state. At that moment, the black-clothed men who had been chasing him relentlessly also instantly surrounded him. It was only then that Levis could clearly see the slightly familiar markings on these black-clothed men, as well as the black and red spirit swords they were all equipped with. In almost every city in Mishio Nation, there was a group of Dark Wing enforcers who only lived at night. They maintained the safety of the city at night and effectively reduced the chances of crime at night. However, these Dark Wing enforcers were also part of the army, and were under the jurisdiction of Mikoxi. Levis knew that there was such a group in Glio City, but this was his first time seeing them in person. Mikoxi's men. His vision was blurry as Levis saw who this group of black-clothed men were. Mr. Levis, because you're suspected of being involved in the disappearance of the great Pope, we're here on General Mikoxi's orders to arrest you. We hope you'll cooperate. The leader of the black-clothed men stepped forward. I see. In an instant, Levis understood everything. All of this was revealed in his mind with a single glance as Michael ACI revealed his identity to the public. He shifted forward and used the last of his strength to escape, but this group of dark wings behind him didn't give him any chance at all. Bang! Bang! 2 gunshots rang out in quick succession from that black and red special spirit sword and hit both of his calves. Levis knew that there was no way for him to escape. He closed his eyes and sighed in his heart. At the same time, he wondered why he had fallen to this state. At that very moment, amidst the deathly silence, he suddenly heard the sound of a few people falling to the ground. Just beside him, a few dark wings had suddenly fallen, falling right beside him. It was a youngster with snow-white hair. He had suddenly appeared here like a ghost, like the incarnation of dark shadow. Under the bright moonlight, his white hair danced in the wind and gave off a faint luster, which was especially eye-catching at this moment. Levis's eyes were blurry, and coupled with his serious injuries, his mind was a little confused in that instant. 5. The youngster, 5 my ass. He was Wang Ying. Set a small target first, like 1 second. Remember, booksellers. Chapter 1808. In the nick of time, Wang Ying appeared by the shore of Fairy Lake and protected Levis, who was surrounded by Dark Wing. Facing the sudden appearance of the white-haired young man, the group of dark shadows was stunned. They wiped their smart law enforcement goggles. Technological means were completely ineffective in front of Wang Ying. They couldn't see Wang Ying's face at all. All they could feel was a mass of nothingness. One of them took off his smart enforcer mirror and tried to use his own spiritual energy to test Wang Ying. In the end, he screamed in pain and fell to his knees with bloodshot eyes. An existence that could not be seen. This was something that only the upper almighty beings could do. In an instant, these dark wings' eyes stared blankly and their nerves tensed up. Who was this person, and why was he here? Leader, what should we do now? Seeing this, the members of Dark Wing communicated with each other through voice transmission. They really did not know what to do. Wang Ying was too powerful. If they fought him head-on, they would only die. On the other hand, they were here under Maxie's orders. Military orders were absolute. They had to bring Levis back. If they failed the mission, they would probably be punished. If they returned unscathed, they would probably die. After thinking it over, the leader of Dark Wing took a deep breath. He took off his smart enforcer mirror and took out a cigarette in front of Wang Ying. After lighting it up, he put it in his mouth and stared at Wang Ying. Senior, we're here under General Maxie's orders. I hope you won't make things difficult for us. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble. Wang Ying squinted his eyes and smiled. He did not answer their question directly. I'll give you a count of 10. But if you don't leave before my countdown ends, you'll all die. He stared at Dark Wing, who was in the air without fear. Then, Senior, please forgive us for our offense. The party leader of Dark Wing took a step forward. Using a hand gesture as a signal, he instantly linked the members around him to form a sword formation. The moonlit Fairy Lake rippled at this moment. The spiritual light emitted by the combined sword formation shone down from the sky and was reflected on the surface of the lake, forming a clear circle of spiritual tattoos. He didn't believe that Wang Ying would really attack them. This was Glio City, a modern cultivation city with strict discipline and cultivation rules. Killing a law enforcer in public in such a place was something that even an almighty could not do. If they were found out, wouldn't the force that the other party belonged to become the target of public criticism? Hence, this party leader Dark Wing was taking a gamble. He was betting that Wang Ying wouldn't dare to kill them. Therefore, he ordered for the sword array to be formed in an attempt to fight against Wang Ying. At this moment, Wang Ying lifted Levis up and placed him on his shoulder. Facing the tens of thousands of murderous sword shadows on the lake, he kept his promise and counted. 10, 9, 8. From the beginning to the end, he maintained his smile. It was the kind of relaxed demeanor that exuded a terrifying pressure at the same time. With every number he counted, Dark Wing could feel a terrifying bloodlust surging up his spine. 7 ticks, Wang Ying was still counting down. Everyone was stunned as the countdown rang out like the Grim Reaper's bell. Wang Ying clearly hadn't made any moves yet, but as the countdown rang out, it was as if they could see the virtual image of a black-robed Grim Reaper behind the youngster. It was a humanoid skeletal creature, tall and awe-inspiring, and as white as jade. Its eye sockets were filled with arrogance and indifference, and it had the power to despise everything. This was Wang Ying's Dharma spirit. Completely different from Wang Ling's cosmic wisdom and extreme gentleness, this was a war machine worthy of its name. Terrifying. Heartless. This was the synonym for Wang Ying's Dharma spirit. For a moment, Fairy Lake was dead silent. Wang Ying hadn't even moved when this Dharma spirit appeared, but cracks immediately appeared in the sword array that had just been formed in the air. It had been directly shattered by this aura, and this dark wing was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Quick, run. Just as Wang Ying was about to count down to the last 3, the Dark Wing team leader instantly roared as if he had woken up from a nightmare. He realized that this wasn't an existence they could contend with. It was a super-dimensional power that surpassed their understanding. This resolute killing intent forced this Dark Wing team leader to make the decision to retreat after Wang Ying counted down to 3. He would rather take the blame himself than watch his young teammates die with him. How boring! Wang Ying secretly snorted. He had thought that these people were tough, but he had still scared them off. But the truth was that even if he did make a move, he would be careful not to take their lives. Even if he accidentally beat them to the brink of death, he would still think of a way to save them. Seeing that everyone had retreated, Wang Ying teleported and brought them to a safe place in an instant. Right after that, he smacked Levis's butt. "You, wake up, stop pretending." Levis immediately opened his eyes. Wang Ying threw Levis down, and only then did Levis realize that he was at the top of the Star Tower. "Thank you for saving me, Senior." He bowed to Wang Ying. While Wang Ying was confronting the group of Dark Wings, Levis realized that his wounds had all healed. Wang Ying had used a healing spell to heal them. This healing speed was faster than going to the hospital, and it required a large amount of spiritual energy to be used in a short period of time. But it was obvious that this spiritual energy was only a drop in the ocean for Wang Ying. It was not worth mentioning. Levis immediately determined that the person who had saved him was the immemorial being that had been mentioned in the intelligence report. According to the intelligence report, there were at least a dozen immemorial beings in the battle sect. Levis didn't know which one Wang Ying was currently. "Senior, are you the Eternal One?" Levis asked. Wang Ying smirked. "You seem to know a lot." In reality, Wang Ying was extremely disdainful. He did not care about any Eternal One at all. In Wang Ying's eyes, most Eternal Ones were rotten fish and prawns, not worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as him. "I've only heard about it from the intel I've received." Levis smiled bitterly. "To be honest, I didn't think McOxy would be so ruthless. He purposely lured the Great Pope into my courtyard, made me kill him by mistake, and then hunted me down in the name of law enforcement. So you have nowhere to go now." Wang Ying said. "If you want to live, you must listen to our orders." "That's for sure, Senior," Levis said submissively. "Where's the Great Pope's body?" Wang Ying asked. "It's here. I've been carrying it with me." Levis took out his storage bag and took out the fridge. Wang Ying moved his finger and opened the fridge, then took out the Great Pope's body. He then raised his fingers, as if he was grabbing something. Levis rubbed his eyes, and was shocked to find that the Great Pope's shadow had been taken out by the battle sect senior who saved him. Wang Ying sneered. Without another word, he directly injected the Great Pope's shadow into Levis's body. This was the shadow membrane assimilation technique. It could use the power of a shadow to attach to another person's body, causing the first shadow to be covered by a designated second shadow membrane. For a short period of time, the person would obtain the exact same memories and abilities as the second shadow's original owner. Even their appearance would change into the original owner's appearance. This was a secret technique that originated from the Shadow Dao. In the universe, other than the Wang siblings, there was currently no other method to distinguish between the real and the fake. At the same time, this was Wang Ying's plan. Right now, he wanted to protect Levis. The best way was to turn him into the Great Pope and reappear in front of the people who killed the Great Pope. Chapter 1809. Everything was going according to plan. Levis, who had assumed the identity of the Great Pope, was no different from an obvious wolf in a werewolf hunt. Even if Mikoasi and Paloki knew that the Great Pope was already dead and that the person in front of them might be a fake pope, they wouldn't act rashly. They would only secretly plot to verify the Great Pope's true identity. Unfortunately, given the current methods on Earth, there was no way to see through Wang Nuan's disguise under the shadow assimilation spell. Levis's shadow had already been surrounded by the Great Pope's shadow, and he had obtained all of the Great Pope's memories, while he himself was the Great Pope himself. His blood, fingerprints, and DNA data would all become a perfect match for the Great Pope, and there would be no mistakes at all. "Do you know what you should do now?" Wang Ying asked as she looked at Levis. This kind of disguise was already beyond Levis's imagination. Looking at this body that had been completely transformed by the shadow assimilation spell, and the memories that poured into his mind, Levis's face was first filled with astonishment, and then all his emotions turned into a kind of uncontrollable anger. He had inherited the Great Pope's will, and had even more so obtained all of the Great Pope's original thoughts and thoughts. Not only did he know that the church planned to attack Huagua Water Curtain Group and Battle Sect, he also clearly understood the Great Pope's attitude toward him. Now, Levis knew everything. He knew that the church had indeed intended to abandon him from the beginning. Furthermore, because of Raven's persuasion, the church hadn't changed their initial strategy toward him. For the church, he was now just a useless pawn, and a pawn that knew too much. After using him, they had to destroy him once and for all. According to the church's original plan, after Raven completely took over Scarlet Orchid Association, they would take advantage of Levis's slack to get rid of him as well. That woman. She knew from the beginning that the Great Pope still wanted to get rid of me. To think that she could even talk about sincere cooperation. Levis smiled bitterly. He felt disgusted at being so deeply deceived that his stomach churned and he retched. He had thought that his relationship with the church was unbreakable, but he had never thought that the White Warriors that Raven had secretly formed over the years would form an unimaginable bond with the church. It was also this layer of fetters and deeper cooperation that caused the church to completely abandon him. Levis had been completely kept in the dark before, and had no idea about this at all. Now that he was the Great Pope, the fog in front of his eyes instantly cleared up. He began to discuss the church, and hated the Great Pope, Raven, Michael ACI, and that Heavenly Tao alliance that only knew how to smooth things over, of course. What made him even more disgusted was Heavenly Dog, who had been plotting behind the scenes. Even the Great Pope was one of the leading members of the Tengu. The infiltration of this organization and the influence it would bring in the future were immeasurable. At this moment, Levis looked at Wang Ying. Although he still could not see Wang Ying's face clearly, he knew that this senior from the Battle Sect was the last straw that he could tightly hold on to. "Senior, don't worry. I will fully cooperate with you in the following operation. I have to do it." "Very well." Wang Ying nodded. Levis was still a smart person, which made him very satisfied. As the saying went, you might know a person for a long time, but not their heart. This shadow assimilation spell allowed Levis to completely understand the role of the church, and completely cut off the last bit of trust he had in the church. Wang Ying threw a phone to Levis. The phone was loaded with the Grey Church's exclusive app. It was an app that was enchanted, and would only appear when it passed through Levis's hands. If someone picked up Levis's phone or checked the contents, the app would automatically hide it and delete all the messages. Information cultivation spells were also one of the hottest topics this year. With the development of cultivation modernization, the development of information-based cultivation spells would also become a key link in the future. "I understand, Senior." Levis took the phone and nodded. "Also, you have been given a new ability," Wang Ying said. "To ensure the smooth development of this intelligence mission, you can now read the thoughts of others as long as you come into contact with their shadows." Come into contact with their shadows? For example, in the middle of a conversation, Find the right light and angle so that your shadow touches the shadow of the person you want to test. That way, you'll know that you'll be able to learn most of the information in their mind. You can do that. Levis was completely stupefied. Meanwhile, on the other side, the number 60 high team was still trying to understand the rules of the variety competition this time. Variety shows were meant to be fun and spoof. Usually, they wouldn't really do anything to the guests, let alone kill them. But after hearing Lotus Sun's rules, everyone from number 60 high suddenly had a bad feeling. For example, in the escape segment in the first round, 6 people would be locked up in different rooms in pairs. Wang Muyu would also be locked up in an independent space in the center of the city, waiting to be rescued. According to the rules, the team that broke the shackles first and found the 3 keys corresponding to the 3 rooms to rescue the little friends in the center of the city would win. Wang Ling understood this principle, but for some reason, the more he listened, the more it sounded like a magically modified version of Saw. Was it true that people were locked up to escape? Did they have to cut off their arms and legs? Wang Ling felt that this was a little too exaggerated. But given the current situation, they had to participate in the variety competition, so how to split them up was a problem. How about this? I'll split up with Old Gua, Fang Xing and classmate Li Yue. Let's split Lingzi with Boss Sun, Super Chen suggested at that moment. In his view, this was a flawless grouping plan. Their original purpose in coming to Glio City had been to help out. Thus, they hadn't forgotten their original mission. Lotus Sun hadn't expected Super Chen to actually be so awesome and was instantly moved to tears. Super Chen gave Lotus Sun a thumbs up, then patted his chest to tell her that he hadn't forgotten his original intentions. Wang Ling saw all of this simple body language and knew very well what it meant, but this kind of grouping was still a little unstable for Wang Ling. After all, this meant that the strongest people would be grouped into one group. He and Lotus Sun were both very strong. With Fang Xing taking care of Li Yue, they naturally didn't have to worry about escaping. It was just Super Chen and Hirogua. One had a blessed mouth and the other had many uncles. Who knew what kind of trouble these two would come up with together? Chapter 1810. A mysterious senior had protected Levis, and the entire Darkwing Brigade was heavily injured. This was the latest news Maiko ACI received at dawn. Originally, the Darkwing Brigade that he had assigned to capture Levis had been carefully selected by McOxy. Every single one of them was a talent. In the end, under the protection of a mysterious senior, the entire Darkwing Brigade's operation was thwarted. Wang Ing, on the other hand, felt wronged because he really did not make a move. If he had, none of the Darkwing Brigade members would have returned alive. Unfortunately, even if he did not make a move, the Darkwing Brigade members were still injured, and all of them were bruised. As for the most heavily injured person, it was the Darkwing leader who was lying on a stretcher with several broken ribs. General, it's your subordinate's fault, he said weakly, his face pale. Maiko Ace could tell that this was not an act, but a real injury. There's no need to say anything. Maiko Ace returned the gesture and held his hand. He was touched by the fact that these Darkwing members were putting their lives on the line. He could guess that the person who protected Levis was someone sent by the battle sect, and it was most likely an ancient one. In the face of a battle that was impossible to win, this party leader Darkwing still took the lead and led his brothers to charge forward in unison. Although Makosai did not witness the scene at that time, he still felt extremely moved when he imagined it. Facing this group of warriors, he naturally could not criticize them. Rest in peace and recuperate. I understand the situation, Maiko ACI said. Although he was usually strict, he was kind to his subordinates. As long as they tried their best, he would not make things difficult for them. Although what he did not know was that after Wang Ing left with Levis, this group of Darkwing Squad had beaten each other to the point of crippling themselves. If it was not for that, the Darkwing Brigade leader felt that he would not have survived this ordeal. After sending off the Darkwing Brigade, Maiko Assie's expression was solemn for a long time. Based on the current situation, Levis was most likely rescued by someone sent by the battle sect, and he did not know Levis's exact location. However, if he could not find Levis, he was worried that his plan to frame Levis would be exposed. General, at the entrance of West Wind Castle, an army soldier suddenly ran in from afar. "What is it?" "The Great Pontiff wants to see the general," the soldier said. "Great Pontiff?" Mykoasi was stunned, and his mind went blank on the spot. He thought he had misheard. However, after thinking about it carefully and confirming that it was the Great Pontiff, he came back to his senses in shock. That old man? He had clearly already. Why did he suddenly come back to life? Mykoasi thought about it and came up with a general possibility. This Great Pontiff might not be the real Great Pontiff. How could a dead person come back to life? Levis. Mykoasi chewed on the name carefully. His lips curled into a cold smile. He had more or less made a judgment on this matter. But this was good too. It would save him the trouble of looking for Levis everywhere in fear. Impersonating the Supreme Pontiff was a capital offense. How dare this mafia boss? How could he have the guts to pretend to be the boss of an old Yuan venerate? Mykoasi smiled. His heart was clear. All that was left was to expose Levis's fake identity, and everything would be solved. Once Levis was dead, all the blame could be pushed to Levis. On the other side, Team 1 leader Paloki of the Heavenly Tao Union was also very anxious. As the source of the entire framing incident, he had thought that his plan to push the blame for the Supreme Pontiff's death to Mykoasi had been perfect. However, the outcome had been unexpected, because he had also received an invitation from the church. The Supreme Pontiff was looking for him for a discussion. But the Supreme Pontiff was clearly dead. What was going on? "Dear, what do we do now?" Paloki's wife was very anxious and helpless. Her hair had turned white overnight, and she had not expected this situation at all. "I suspect that Mykoasi already guessed that this was a framing. That's why he set this up." Paloki frowned. "How could a dead person come back to life? Then what should we do now?" "It's better to bide our time," Paloki said. "If I'm not wrong, this Supreme Pontiff is a fake one. It's very likely that Mykoasi found someone to impersonate him. He wants to test our reaction. If I show too much shock when I see the Supreme Pontiff, I will definitely be exposed. But I have to go now." "Everything will be fine, right?" "Yes, everything will be fine." Paloki sighed endlessly in his heart as he did his best to comfort his wife. "Don't worry, I won't show any flaws. As long as I firmly believe that this fake Supreme Pontiff is the real Supreme Pontiff, there won't be a problem. Of course, if this matter doesn't end well in the end, there's only one last step left." He didn't continue, because that was a very crazy and scary idea. In order to protect his family from being affected, as a last resort, he could only think of a way to make this fake Supreme Pontiff and Mykoasi perish together. At the same time, everyone at number 60 High also received new information from none other than Mykoasi's daughter, Micah Bay, and Paloki's son, Pei Xiaoyuan. The two of them didn't provide any substantial information and only gave a simple description of the current atmosphere at home. Because of the Supreme Pontiff, the atmosphere on both sides seemed quite heavy. And almost all of this was within Wang Ling's calculations. In the room, Lotus Sun covered her small mouth slightly, her heart stunned. She had thought that she already had a comprehensive understanding of this teenager, but after this incident, she felt that her understanding of Wang Ling had been renewed once again. It really wouldn't be an exaggeration to call Wang Ling Director Wang tonight. Now, the forces that had joined forces to deal with them in Benglio City were starting to suspect and bite each other. Although they didn't know what the final outcome would be, it would be too difficult for the other side to split their attention to deal with Huagua Water Curtain Group and Battle Sect while they were busy with their own affairs. If the hearts of the people weren't united, even if a plan was forcibly drawn up, it would definitely be full of loopholes. In fact, even Wang Ling himself hadn't expected that with just a few arrangements, the other side's rhythm would be completely disrupted. So compared with these extremely weak forces, what gave Wang Ling a bigger headache now was the upcoming variety competition. After all, in the first round, he and Lotus Sunday, they would be locked up together. Chapter 1811. That morning, Lavin sent a group message to Mike Axie, Pei Luochi and Leaves on WeChat to briefly explain today's arrangements. In the end, it was as if the two of them had disappeared and didn't reply to her. But the plan still had to go ahead. Not replying for the time being didn't mean that Lavin would stop the rest of the plan. Every segment of the variety show challenge competition this time was a test of humanity. She wanted to make public the ugliness of those people from number 60 high, and more importantly, the ugliness of the eldest miss of Huagua Water Curtain Group. She didn't know what on earth had happened to Mike Axie, Pei Luochi and Leaves, but early in the morning, the other representative of the Heavenly Dao Alliance, Jiao Yun, who was to play the role of a primary school student in this variety show challenge competition, punctually appeared in front of Lady Lavin, followed by a group of white warriors. Jiao Yun wasn't very tall. It was said that his body had stopped growing because he cultivated a special technique. He looked like a child but was in fact already an old monster. When he stood up, he was about the same height as Wang Muyu. He wore a black one-piece work outfit, had long light blonde hair, and even had earrings in his ears. His eyes were bright, and from a distance, he looked like a little girl. "Lord Jiao Yun, I've been waiting for you for a long time." Lady Lavin stood up and warmly shook his hand. Jiao Yun looked at Madame Lavin's hand with disinterest. In the end, she only extended her index finger and touched her finger symbolically. She had quite the personality. "When will the operation begin?" Jiao Yun didn't say much, and asked directly. "Very soon, Lord Jiao Yun. But before that, you need to change your image a little. To be honest, you don't look like a child at all." Lavin smiled. Lord Jiao Yun is playing the role of a primary school student this time, so his overall temperament is more like one. I've already prepared the props and school uniform for Lord Jiao Yun. I hope Lord Jiao Yun can take off your accessories and hide your tattoo. Your hair. Don't touch my hair, Jiao Yun looked at Lavin and said firmly. But I won't touch your hair. Lavin had no choice but to agree. Lord Jiao Yun, do you have any other instructions? Jiao Yun lowered her small head and pondered for a moment. Then she raised her head and looked at Lavin. If I can't control myself during the challenge and make a killing move, you'll take care of it later, right? This, naturally. Lavin nodded her head. However, I hope that Lord Jiao Yun can control himself as much as possible. You can injure him, but you must not kill him. I can only do my best. Jiao Yun said, I'm acting as an elementary school student, but I'm not really an elementary school student. That kid at number 60 high is a proper primary school student. I hate brats the most. If that brat attacks me, I really won't be able to hold myself back. Before coming here, Jiao Yun had already gone through the information on everyone from number 60 high in detail. They were just a few foundation establishment students, and didn't look like they were worth paying attention to. In particular, Wang Muyu was taking part in the competition with a 6-year-old child. In Jiao Yun's opinion, Wang Muyu was simply a burden to everyone at number 60 high. Apart from that Miss Sun, there was nothing worth paying attention to at all in the data. Jiao Yun also didn't know why so many experts had died at number 60 high. It was Wang Ling's first time participating in the recording of a variety show. Early in the morning, thanks to Wicked GPS, they smoothly arrived at the agreed filming location. This was a large sports center in Griot City, which was only used for large-scale national cultivation sports events. Previously, it had often been requisitioned by Griot City's local cultivation troops as a military demonstration and training ground. But now, Lavin had actually requisitioned this vast piece of land for the recording of a variety show, and had even remodeled the interior. One couldn't help but sigh at Lavin's strength and methods. This large sports center had been built in a desolate part of Griot City. Originally, there had been a tall mountain here, and the entire gymnasium had been built against the mountain. The inside of the mountain had been directly hollowed out to make room for the gymnasium. The key was that the exterior structure of the mountain had been preserved as a whole through the technical excavation, and the spirit veins under the mountain hadn't been destroyed. Even a spirit gathering array didn't need to be drawn. This was a natural place for cultivation and seclusion. For the recording of the variety show this time, Lavin had once again invested heavily in remodeling the interior structure of the sports center. When Wang Ling's group arrived, they saw a lot of program staff gathered together, and the photography team was remotely testing whether the camera balls were working properly. It was such a huge lineup that Wang Ling felt a little uncomfortable. Although he could wear a mask throughout the recording of the variety show this time and didn't need to show his face, in front of so many people, Wang Ling still felt like his social phobia was acting up faintly. He didn't know if there were other people like him. As long as there were a lot of people around, their minds would involuntarily start to blank out, and they wouldn't know what to do or say next. It was like they were detached from the world and didn't fit in. Fortunately, this process didn't last long, and by the time they entered the studio, Wang Ling's symptoms had eased a lot. The staff were mainly gathered in the temporary shed outside. After entering the remodeled studio, there were not so many people following the people who participated in the recording. They were surrounded by flying photography balls, recording the situation inside from 360 degrees without any blind spots. After waiting for less than a few minutes, Wang Ling saw number 60 high's opponents from another entrance. There were also 6 people leading a primary school student who was about the same height as Wang Muyu, and they directly entered the studio. Each of them was wearing a turbine mask. Are they the 6 prodigies from Glio? Super Chen's expression was slightly surprised under the mask with the number 60 high logo on it. Whirlpool Emperor High School is the number 1 high school in Glio. The 6 prodigies this time are all from here. As an old intelligence expert, Hirogwa had already inquired about these 6 prodigies. They're all grade 1 students like us, but they've already reached the Golden Core stage. All of them are Golden Core cultivators? That's so unfair. It's just that they have an advantage in terms of realm. There's almost no actual battle in the preparation part of the program. It's more of a test of teamwork, Hirogwa said. In fact, he himself wasn't very confident. After the 2 sides shook hands, everyone was put on masks by the staff, and they were divided into black and white sections based on their schools. There were 3 secret rooms in each of the black and white areas. Based on the previous team distribution, everyone was arranged in groups of 2 into the secret rooms. From the perspective of the void, the place where everyone was standing was a Tai Chi disc. Wang Muyu and Jiao Yun were brought to 2 special cages in the middle of the Tai Chi plate, Yin and Yang, and Yin and Yang, respectively. On Wang Ling's side, it was a little more exciting. When he clearly heard the heavy stone door of the secret room close, the only sound left in the room was the sound of his and Lotus Sun's breathing in the darkness. In this quiet environment, even the sound of their breathing was particularly clear. It was really too clear. Wang Ling could even clearly count her heartbeat. Chapter 1812. Wang Ling and Lotus Sun were locked up in a square secret room that was 80 feet long and wide. Super Chen and Hirogwa were in one group, while Li Yuyue and Feng Xing were in the other, and they were also locked up. At this moment, everyone was facing the same problem. He realized that both his and Lotus Sun's hands had been shackled in special shackles, and it would have been very difficult for a normal Foundation establishment cultivator to pry them open. He and Lotus Sun's shackles were the same. One end was connected to him, while the other was connected to Lotus Sun's hand after winding around the giant stone lock at the very front of the secret chamber. The key to unlock the shackles was behind the stone lock. That was a very extreme position. If one person moved closer to the key, the shackles would retract towards the other person and finally hit the soft needles on the back wall. These soft needles all had paralyzing venom. Once they were hit, it meant that they would lose a member of their team for at least the next 2 to 3 rounds. It might even become a breakthrough point. Of course, it was not that there was no way to ensure everyone's survival. There was a small saw at a place where the 2 of them could reach, but it was impossible to cut the chain with just a small saw, unless one of them was sacrificed to cut off their hands. Wang Ling could tell that this was the plot of Saw. Sure enough, modern variety shows always paid homage to the classics. He sighed inwardly and was seriously thinking of countermeasures, but the predicament he was facing didn't end there. Lotus Sun's heartbeat was too fast, and it was especially obvious in such a quiet environment. Bang, 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 bang. Wang Ling's eardrums were constantly irritated. He had already strengthened Lotus Sun quite a bit, and the girl had been through a lot recently, so it was reasonable to say that she shouldn't be that scared. It could only be said that girls were afraid of the dark. After thinking for a long time, this was the only answer he could come up with. He didn't know how to comfort her, so in the end he could only clumsily say, "Don't be afraid." These words made Lotus Sun's heart beat faster, and she blushed so much that she buried her face in her knees. Even with the mask, she was still worried that he would notice her expression. Now that she had strength, how could she be afraid of the layout of this secret room? It was all because he was locked up with this idiot. However, it was normal for the blockhead in front of her to be insensitive. Lotus Sun was already used to it. Therefore, her challenge was no longer limited to this small secret room and the challenge on the variety show. It was very easy for her to break through the secret room, but more importantly, she had to make this blockhead understand her intentions. In such a dark environment, she could use her fear of the dark as an excuse to appear a little more afraid than usual. Who knew, she might be able to make this blockhead come to his senses and protect her. In that case, she would be able to get closer to Wang Ling. Thus, for Lotus Sun at present, she only had one mission, and that was to never let Wang Ling know that she wasn't afraid of the dark at all. As for the other side, for Wang Ling, his challenges were no longer limited to this small secret room and the challenge on the variety show. Breaking the secret room was very easy for him, but it was more important to keep a low profile. Even in such a dim environment, there were still so many camera balls surrounding them from all angles. Even if they were covered by masks, the variety show would still be broadcasted after the filming was completed. This was only the first segment. If he performed too well at this time, he would definitely be remembered by the audience. Participating in the variety show was already against the old Wang family's low-key strategy to begin with, so Wang Ling now only had one thought, and that was to appear as low-key and useless as possible, leaving everything to Lotus Sunday. But the problem was that he hadn't expected Lotus Sun to actually be afraid of the dark. There was no other way. In this situation, Wang Ling didn't want to do it himself, but he and Lotus Sun were now in the same boat, and someone had to come out and perform. Thus, Wang Ling suddenly thought of a way. He could use his fear of the dark as an excuse to hide in a corner and wait for Lotus Sun to make a move. According to scientific research, under extreme circumstances, people could stimulate their adrenal glands and thus need to break through. Being afraid of the dark was just a small problem. Wang Ling believed that given Lotus Sun's personality, she would definitely be able to overcome it in a short time. Thus, for Wang Ling now, he only had one mission, and that was to never let Lotus Sun know that he actually wasn't afraid of the dark. Lotus Sun buried her face in her knees for a long time. She thought that Wang Ling would think of a way to comfort her, but in the end, she never expected that this youngster who had just told her, "Don't be afraid," would actually bury his face in his knees. She was shocked. It turned out that Wang Ling was also afraid of the dark. This was something that Lotus Sun had never expected. But Wang Ling with his face buried in his knees was really cute. Out of the corner of her eye, Lotus Sun sized up the youngster who was in the same position as her, and her thoughts ran wild. She suddenly felt, in such a dark environment, staying with Wang Ling like this also seemed pretty good. It was impossible to struggle. She was now chained to a chain by Wang Ling. Perhaps her warmth and thoughts could be transmitted directly to this youngster's heart through this chain. At the same time, in a temporary recording shed set up outside the sports center, Madame Lavin and a group of cameramen who were manipulating camera balls with remote controls stared dumbfoundedly at the scene in front of them. The variety show had just started, and the most interesting part was the secret room where eldest Miss Sun was in. Both of them had actually buried their faces in their knees without moving at all. "Teacher Ma, what's going on? Why isn't the camera ball moving at all?" Madame Lavin asked a cameraman surnamed Ma. "Madam, this isn't a still image. Instead, those two really aren't moving at all. Maybe they're afraid of the dark?" This cameraman smiled bitterly. In theory, this is also a sign of tacit understanding, but there's nothing we can do about it in this situation. We can only let them find a breakthrough on their own. Madame Lavin had already suspected that there was a hidden expert among the number 60 high team. She had thought that through this segment, she would be able to find out who the hidden expert was, and had focused most of her energy on Lotus Sun and Wang Ling's team. A woman's intuition told her that these two were the most likely suspects. But Madame Lavin had never expected them to actually be afraid of the dark. The show had just started, and they were already burying their faces in their knees like ostriches. This old lady invited you here to perform, not to act cute. How could this be? Hurry up and think of something. We can't let them keep doing this. Think of a way to provoke them, Madame Lavin said. She didn't believe that these two would remain indifferent after she increased the intensity. Chapter 1813. Because this was a recorded variety competition, Lavin thought that all the dramatic changes were within his control. Before a variety show was edited, in order to enrich the elements, the guests would often be stimulated to give a lot of unexpected feedback, and finally, the show would be more interesting and exciting through editing. There were even times when malicious editing techniques were used to create a topic of conversation. These were the unspoken rules of the industry. Compared with the indifferent number 60 high school students, the performance of the 6 great child prodigies in Maelstrom Emperor was incomparably brilliant. They were also trapped in a secret room in pairs, but these people used different methods to break free of the chains in front of them. As expected of the 6 top geniuses among the new students in Maelstrom Emperor, they can actually rely on their spirit roots to extract trace elements from the air and synthesize them into simple talisman materials. Cinnabar, yellow talismans, spirit water, and writing brush. In number 60 high school's first talisman class, it had actually been mentioned that these were the 4 basic materials for making talismans. However, there were times when it was impossible to have such a complete set of materials in an extreme environment, and they could only look for alternatives. Elemental powder, which could be condensed from trace elements extracted from the air, was the perfect material to replace cinnabar. In the absence of yellow talismans, one could also tear one's clothes into strips of cloth to replace the talismans. High-ranking almighty beings could even directly bite their fingertips to draw talismans on the rough ground or even in the air. This was because the spirit energy in their bodies was strong enough, and the spirit power in their blood was strong enough to replace specific spirit water. As for their fingers, they were ready-made materials to replace the shaft of a writing brush. Of course, there were also some people who would pull out their hair and use it to write. The methods used by the 6 people in Maelstrom Emperor were almost the same. They all wrote talismans to help them break free. The 2 people in Maelstrom Emperor's first secret room both had water spirit roots. Inside the secret room, they created a corrosive mist talisman that was harmless to the human body, but had a strong corrosive power on metal. Little by little, they increased the density of the mist, and the corrosive mist corroded the chains. This method was very slow, but it was effective enough. The show's production staff estimated that it would take about 2 hours for these 2 people to be completely free. The people locked up in Maelstrom Emperor's second secret room were gold and fire spirit roots, and the methods they used were even more amazing. They directly created a weapon-strengthening talisman to enchant and strengthen the metal saw next to them. They've actually mastered such a complicated strengthening method. Quite a number of the program producers were stunned when they saw the image on the camera. As long as he strengthened the metal saw to +6, he could easily saw through the chain. But this kind of strengthening depended on luck. If he failed even once in the middle, he would have to start from the beginning again. Therefore, the 2 of them took off their jackets and cut them into countless strips of cloth, looking as if they were ready to go all out. Thus, these 2 people took off their coats and cut them into countless strips as they prepared to go. As for the last 2 prodigies in the Maelstrom Emperor, they were people with Earth Spirit Root and Wood Spirit Root respectively. The 2 of them combined their own physical conditions and used simple talismans to modify their arms. This was a method to assimilate a part of one's body with nature. Although the shackles restricted the human body, as long as one's arms were turned into soil or branches, one could easily break free from the shackles. If there was light, their assimilation speed would be greatly increased. Unfortunately, the dark environment limited their assimilation speed. Otherwise, this group of people would definitely be the first to escape. With these 6 people in Whirlpool Emperor as a comparison, the people on number 60 high's side were clearly salted fish. The contrast could be said to be very obvious. It can't be. They can't all be salted fish, right? Madame Raven sucked in a breath of cold air with a somewhat incredulous expression on her face. According to the intelligence she had received, there was at least one hidden expert among the people from number 60 high school, and it was impossible for them to all be indifferent salted fish. But given the current situation, the people from number 60 high didn't react at all. Could it be that the information was wrong? Madame Lavin frowned. She took out a remote control device that she had prepared in advance. That was the equipment that the senior standing behind her had given her in order to cooperate with the variety challenge this time. It was also known as the expert appraisal remote control. As long as she pressed the button, the 3 secret rooms in number 60 high school would enter power-up mode, and then something even more dangerous would happen. In a crisis, people often had to react to the impending danger, and they would definitely be able to see some clues. But if the 3 secret rooms were to power up at the same time, innocent people would definitely be implicated. Although Raven's objective was to test them, her original intention was just to ferret out that hidden expert. Thus, after thinking about it, Madame Lavin made a decision, and that was to test Wang Ling and Lotus Sun's secret room, which she was most suspicious of. With a kind expression on her face, she surreptitiously pressed the independent button on the expert appraisal remote control in her pocket. In the dark, 80-foot-wide secret room, the moment Madame Lavin pressed the button on the expert appraisal remote control, Wang Ling immediately sensed the abnormal change in the secret room. Although he and Lotus Sun still buried their faces in their knees and pretended to be afraid of the dark, Wang Ling abruptly opened his eyes in the darkness when this inexplicable pressure from beyond the heavens arrived. This was the aura of an ancient. It was the same aura as that of the sea demon layman whom Lotus Sun had encountered before. Back then, the sea demon layman had addressed that envoy from beyond the heavens as Holy Venerable. Behind that Holy Venerable stood an even bigger umbrella of protection, which was that legendary Holy King. Thus, in that instant, Wang Ling immediately realized that this ancient who had been sent by Raven to test them was most likely on Holy King's side. Wang Ling sighed deeply. He hadn't wanted to make a move at first. But this expert appraisal remote control was really a little difficult. And most importantly, this ancient was much more powerful than that sea demon layman whom Wang Ling had sent to deal with Lotus Sun previously. If Lotus Sun were to deal with this, it might be a little out of line. What kind of ancient being was this? It was a snow-white skeleton in a black cloak. Its eyes were hollow and deep, as if they could suck people into an exiled era, and it was much more powerful than Li Xian and Zhang Ziqin. This was an ancient with an immortal body. Wang Ling judged that this ancient wasn't human, but a member of the undead race, a rare race that had once appeared in the universe. Judging from the aura this snow-white skeleton gave off, it was very likely that this person was a king of the undead race. And so, in the darkness, this new eternal one appeared in front of Wang Ling. Almost immediately, Wang Ling snapped his fingers. Time froze in the entire universe at the same time. Only he and this king of the undead race could move, and he patted the dust off his butt, stood up from the ground, and stood in front of Lotus Sunday. "It's you?" It was obvious that this ancient of the undead race was a little surprised. It had never expected Wang Ling to be the person who had been hiding all this time. Chapter 1814. The undead were said to be immortal, but that wasn't the case. They were born with long lifespans, and could live for a very long time without the need to cultivate. Wang Ling had taken Lotus Sun to the immortal star before, which was in fact a fragment of the immortal star where the undead lived. Wang Ling knew very little about the undead, and only heard that they had died back then because of a disaster caused by their longevity. In order to live longer, the outer gods had forcibly captured these snow-white skeletons as food in an attempt to break down the undead's natural genes and increase their lifespan in the world. Thus, in theory, The undead had been eaten up. Wang Ling looked at the snow-white skeleton in front of him in a black cloak, a red light flowing in his king's eye. This was an undead that had already matured, and was much more powerful than the average ancient one. In the eyes of many ancient ones, it was simply unbelievably strong. But most of the undead didn't live to this age at all, and were dissolved in the stomachs of other races. Sometimes, a long maturation period could be very troublesome, because as they grew up, they could be targeted by villains at any time and become their food. I've never seen an earthling like you. Perhaps it hadn't expected Wang Ling to be the hidden ancient one that the holy king behind it had been looking for all this time, but after staring at Wang Ling for a long time, the snow-white skeleton spoke unhurriedly. In fact, it had been using its own method to repeatedly investigate Wang Ling's true identity. In the end, when it discovered that the youngster in front of it really was just a standard earthling, the astonishment that hadn't stirred up the slightest ripple for thousands of years suddenly shook the calm lake in its heart. Not only was he an earthling, he was also a terrifying one. In addition to being born with extremely long lifespans, the undead also had a pair of deeply sunken eye sockets. Even without the use of eye techniques, these eye sockets, which seemed to contain the eternal stars, still had the terrifying ability to see through everything. If a regular cultivator looked at it for a long time, they would definitely be stuck in the eye world of its eye sockets and be unable to extricate themselves. It would feel as if their souls had taken off and been drawn into the universe. When that time came, it would be time for the undead to reap their harvest. But at that moment, Wang Ling was standing in front of him, staring at him with those red eyes that he couldn't see through. The youth's eyes looked ordinary at first glance, and there was nothing strange about them. However, after the skeleton prince of the undead clan observed them for a while, he suddenly felt his body lighten. Soon after, the surrounding space was no longer in the secret room, but had been swept into a vast sea of stars. I'm suffering from a backlash. The skeleton prince had never seen such a situation before. He, a king of the undead race, had actually lost to an earthling. Instead, it was his soul that had entered someone else's eye power world. What was even more frightening was that this youth's eye force world was boundlessly vast. His eye force world was at most the size of a solar system, but this youth's eye force world was a universe of its own, boundlessly vast. How could an earthling be so strong? The undead skeleton prince could not understand. He seriously suspected that he had been cheated. That was not what the Lord under the Holy King Highness had told him when he found him. He only said that it was very likely that there was a hidden ancient one in number 60 High's team, and that Wang Ling needed to find out. But given the current situation, how was this a test? He was about to lose his life. This was his first instinct as the undead prince, and he immediately sensed that Wang Ling was a very dangerous existence. But as a prince of the undead, he still had that last bit of stubborn dignity. Even though he knew that he couldn't beat Wang Ling, he still had to fight back. As Li Xian and Zhang Zidi had said before, there had been a lot of forces and races in the universe in the Immemorial Age, but most of them had actually looked down on the Ancient One. Over time, a chain of contempt had formed. Like the undead, they had been despised by the Old Ones, and had even been reduced to food for the outer gods. In the Immemorial Age, they had carried out the undead are precious movement every day, shouting slogans to protest against discrimination and suppression. In the end, they had turned around and inflicted the Old Ones' rudeness on the rest of the races. It was said that time was a cycle. Wang Ling felt that this was very reasonable. This was because this phenomenon still existed in the modern cultivation world. Earthling, don't come over. I may have entered your eye force world, but I'm not afraid of you. If I self-destruct here, you'll be blinded in at least one eye. The skeleton prince threatened Wang Ling as he tried to negotiate with him. At the same time, Wang Ling could sense the restlessness of the other party's unyielding heart beneath the black cloak. It was an azure flame that symbolized the heart of the undead, and this skeleton prince's heart was extremely resplendent. He secretly channeled spirit energy as he watched Wang Ling vigilantly. A few seconds later, a prayer bead strung together from several small skulls suddenly flew out from under his black cloak. In an instant, the godly might of the skull prayer bead erupted, and spirit energy surged as it swallowed up all the starlight in the sky. Like a gluttonous snake that had suddenly invaded this world, the powerful spirit power sucked countless stars into its body. Boom! The moment the skull prayer bead erupted, it produced an extremely terrifying power of disillusionment and opened up an immortal small world, which was like a small island isolated from the rest of the world in Wang Ling's I-Force world. Wang Ling nodded to himself. To be able to open up another world in his I-Force world to resist external pressure was already very impressive. This world had been created by the Skeleton Prince using the prayer beads in his hand. In the current environment, it was like a submarine entrenched in the depths of the ocean and was at risk of being crushed by the water pressure at any moment. Wang Ling didn't use any force and just waited to see when the Skeleton Prince's isolated island would collapse. After a silent count of about 8 seconds. Sure enough, there was another loud boom. The newly formed island collapsed in a very short period of time. Wang Ling didn't wait any longer. A beam of light wrapped around his fingers, and with a light squeeze, the entire island collapsed in front of his eyes. At the same time, he lightly crooked his index finger, and the Skeleton Prince's prayer beads betrayed him in public as they directly flew into Wang Ling's palm. Give it back. At that moment, the Skeleton Prince was furious. Although this prayer bead wasn't the most powerful magic treasure he had, it was of great significance. Because each string of skulls on the prayer beads was formed from the skulls of each of his blood relatives, and was a very powerful magic treasure. It was just that he never expected that this prayer bead, which had been created with his blood relatives as the foundation, would actually be unable to resist the temptation of Wang Ling's outstretched finger and directly fall into his hand. He couldn't help but spit out blood at the feeling of being betrayed. Chapter 1815. At this point, the Skeleton Prince clearly understood that there was no chance of winning if he used head-on methods to deal with the youth in front of him. This youth from Earth was too strange. There was something strange about him that he had never seen before, giving him an indescribable feeling of strangeness. He did not know what he ate to grow up to be so powerful. He thought of a very strange primordial one, who was also a miraculous genius who once had the power to control the universe. Unfortunately, this genius had overestimated his own strength before he matured and tried to challenge the Outer God Palace. In the end, he was swallowed by the palace and never returned. Facing Wang Ling now, the Skeleton Prince had reason to believe that Wang Ling was the reincarnation of that legendary genius from back then. King of all phases, Li Luo. At that moment, he stared at Wang Ling and asked tentatively, Li Luo? Wang Ling frowned slightly and very quickly remembered this person, because according to the list of corpses that Zhang Ziden and Li Xian had compiled, there was indeed a skeleton called Li Luo in the Supreme Corpse winding up painting that Wang Ling had. Back then, Dao ancestor Wang had barged into the outer deity palace and rescued him from a narrow escape. When he was rescued, all that was left of Li Luo was an incomplete skeleton. He was also one of the few ancient people with broken limbs in the corpse burial painting. Wang Ling didn't know why the Skeleton Prince would equate this ancient being, who had once been called the King of 10,000 Forms, with himself, but looking at the other party's misunderstood expression, it wasn't hard to guess that this snow-white skeleton in front of him had some kind of misunderstanding. I know that I won't be able to defeat you head-on. However, I still have other ways to deal with you, said the Skeleton Prince. With the last bit of his strength, he condensed a large amount of spiritual energy, causing the void around him to distort. At this moment, the pure white finger bone was dismantled with a crack, and then suddenly shot forward with a swoosh. This was a human bullet created from his finger bone. Its speed was extremely fast and spirit light surged. It swept up a huge spirit pattern wave in the air and rushed into the clouds. Wang Ling didn't move because he could tell that this human bullet wasn't aimed at him. The Skeleton Prince's target wasn't him, but I know it's very despicable to use such methods in a duel. But now, as long as he could win, there was no harm in being a little despicable. If you want to ensure the safety of the girl beside you, I advise you not to resist. The Skeleton Prince spoke coldly, but the finger bone he shot out was aimed at Lotus Sunday. At this time, Lotus Sun was in a motionless state due to the effect of the time stop. In fact, the moment the skeleton prince had appeared, he had already secretly set up a spatial passage in the narrow secret room that was aimed directly at Lotus Sunday. Even if he was pulled into another space later, he could use this space passage to directly use Lotus Sun as a hostage to blackmail Wang Ling. This idea was perfect in the skeleton prince's eyes. But the truth was that the skeleton prince didn't expect that the moment he set up the space passage, Wang Ling had already thought of a way to protect Lotus Sunday. Hence, he didn't listen to the skeleton prince's orders at all as he walked toward the skeleton prince step by step. "Don't come over. Don't touch me," the skeleton prince shouted, but when he saw that the youngster still had no intention of stopping, he panicked on the spot and looked at Wang Ling in disbelief. "You really don't care if this girl lives or dies? Forget it. I'll just kill this woman first. Even if I die, I'll drag her down with me." At that moment, with a thought, the finger bone he had shot out earlier suddenly pierced through the space passage and stabbed forward. However, this incomparably sharp shackle, which was beyond the understanding of Earth cultivators, was blocked by a glowing red shield of light that matched the color of Wang Ling's eyes. The skeleton prince controlled the finger bone from a distance. He first exerted force, but in the end, he wasn't able to penetrate the shield that Wang Ling had put on Lotus Sunday. Seeing that Wang Ling was still slowly approaching him, the skeleton prince panicked on the spot. If you have the guts, stand still and let this king break your shield first. I don't believe that I can't even break your shield." "It's no use," Wang Ling thought in his heart. He sighed softly and stopped to watch the skeleton prince's performance for the time being. At the same time, he felt that this skeleton prince was silly and adorable. He clearly knew that he wasn't Wang Ling's match, but still insisted on using this kind of threatening method to deal with him. At that moment, the expression on the skeleton prince's snow-white bones as he used all his strength to try and break the shield was hilarious. Even his bones were covered in a layer of red. This was a stab that he had mustered all his strength to stab downwards. In the end, his fingertips directly spun on the shield like a drill bit at a super high speed. This was an astonishing speed. It reached 1 trillion times in 1 second. He concentrated all his damage on one point in the shield, trying to use the most powerful pressure to shatter Wang Ling's spirit energy shield. Finally, after trying hard for about 5 minutes, the skeleton prince saw the light. He finally saw it. He stabbed a small hole in the shield, and very quickly, the crack spread out in all directions like a spider web. "It's broken. It finally broke." The skeleton prince was so excited that he cried tears of joy. His fingertips had been rubbed flat, and he had used all his strength to finally see the broken shield. But at the same time, he felt a new sense of despair, because he realized that there was actually another shield layer behind this one. So it's a multi-layered shield. The skeleton prince scratched his head. He didn't fight Wang Ling, and instead directly fought the shield head-on, unable to extricate himself from breaking it. He looked at Wang Ling fiercely. "If I don't break all your shields today, I won't have the face to continue living in this cultivation world." Wang Ling opened his mouth and tried to persuade the skeleton prince. "You don't have to persuade me. I've made up my mind. You don't have to worry about me getting in the way. I'll make my finger bones invisible later. Those Earth cultivators won't be able to see my existence with their magic power and surveillance equipment. Once I break all your shields, I'll fight you again." The skeleton prince vowed to Wang Ling. At that moment, Wang Ling sighed endlessly in his heart. Looking at the stubborn skeleton prince, he really didn't know what to say. A normal multi-layered spirit energy shield would have dozens of layers at most. Because of the structure, the more layers a spirit energy shield was, the more spirit energy it would take to set it up, which was proportional to the consumption. A multi-layered shield often required the combined spirit energy of multiple cultivators to set it up. However, Wang Ling's spirit energy was inexhaustible. In addition, he had always been a steady person. So when he had set it up back then, he had directly covered Lotus Sun with 100 million layers, It was clear that the skeleton prince didn't realize the seriousness of the problem at that moment. Chapter 1816. Inside the space inside the king's eye, Wang Ling couldn't bear to lay a hand on Skeleton Prince for a moment as he watched him bury his head in the shield and work hard. Although he didn't have any flesh on his face and it was hard to tell what his expression was, his posture was truly one of single-mindedness, as serious as when Wang Ling was reviewing his homework. This seriousness wasn't fake, and Wang Ling could tell that this skeleton prince really intended to break through his 100 million shields. However, piercing through the shield was easier said than done. Wang Ling's style of doing things had always been steady. When he had set up the first layer of the shield, he had even cast a refresh spell. In other words, even if the skeleton prince managed to break through to the last level, if he didn't have a way to dispel his respawn incantation and chose to break through directly, he wouldn't be able to do so. Then, the shields that he had destroyed earlier. It will be refreshed. He could not bear to disturb the idiotic prince who was focused on breaking the shield, so he retreated from the king's eye and allowed the skeleton prince to continue his grand ambition. On the other side, the skeleton prince heaved a sigh of relief after seeing Wang Ling leave. In fact, the moment Wang Ling had taken his rosary beads, he had already clearly sensed the gap between their battle strength. Clashing head-on with Wang Ling at this time was tantamount to death. He was the last descendant of the undead clan, so he had to ensure his own survival first. Furthermore, as the last descendant, he was a member of the royal family. Therefore, it was impossible for him to surrender. Today's trending topic on the internet would never appear on him. Therefore, as a descendant of the undead tribe's royal family, the skeleton prince's final stubbornness was to use his shield to divert attention. Now that Wang Ling was gone, the pressure on him had abruptly lessened. But he was also well aware that he absolutely couldn't stop working on the shield. Every moment he could drill through it could save his life. After returning to the cramped, damp, and dark secret room, Wang Ling realized that the finger bone which the skeleton prince had used to drill into Lotus Sun had really disappeared, but he could still see that it was still working very hard with his eye power. After curling his body back into the corner, he buried his head in his knees again, and with a snap, he secretly snapped his fingers to resume the flow of time. He had a great battle with the skeleton prince in the king's eye. In reality, it didn't take up much time in the real world. Madame Raven stared blankly at number 60 High School's secret room number 1, where there was still no progress. She clearly pressed the button just now. Why was there no movement at all? This button is fake? At this moment, Madame Lavin secretly gritted her teeth. When the senior handed the button to her, he clearly said that there were only 3 chances to test the button. Moreover, every time he pressed the button, he would summon a powerful primordial one to assist him. But she had clearly pressed it just now, so why wasn't there any reaction at all? Puzzled, Raven pressed the button a second time in the secret room where Lotus Sun and Wang Ling were. After sensing that the second ancient one was about to arrive, Wang Ling heard the familiar snap of his fingers again. The second immemorial one was a lion-headed half-beastman. It was also one of the races that had declined during the immemorial era. After seeing Wang Ling, this lion-headed half-orc's eyes were clearly a little astonished. He looked at Wang Ling with a disdainful attitude. Although our bloodline has already declined, I can still recreate the glory of the immemorial Lion Emperor in front of you. The immemorial Lion clan paid particular attention to the power of bloodlines, so the moment this lion-headed man appeared, he sensed the aura of Wang Ling's earthling bloodline. Ordinary, mediocre, plain, low level, these words instantly flashed through the lion-headed man's mind. But at the same time, he couldn't figure out why an earthling youngster could stand firm under his spiritual pressure and fight him head-on. Also, before this, there should have been other immemorial ones here, right? He remembered that the undead skeleton prince had clearly been summoned away. But why hadn't there been any aura left at the scene? Looking at the lion-headed man in front of him, Wang Ling sighed silently. Without saying anything else, he directly used the space of the king's eye to invite the lion-headed man in. Damn it, how can this earthling have such a trick? By the time the lion-headed man realized that he had been sucked into the space of the king's eye, it was already too late. He had a look of disbelief on his face. Because in the space of the king's eye, he saw the undead skeleton prince who had come in before him. "What are you doing?" The lion-headed man was stunned. Because this skeleton prince seemed to be trying very hard to drill into something in the space of the king's eye. "Ha, you're here. Brother Lion. I'm breaking the shield. You don't understand. This shield is hard to break. This king has to break it today." The skeleton prince laughed. "I think you're scared. You're the descendant of the undead's royal family. He's just an earthling, why are you so afraid?" The lion-headed man snorted in an indifferent tone. In the next moment, the golden mane around his neck suddenly released a dazzling light like the sun. Each strand of the golden mane was strengthened to become a peerless sword that shot out in all directions. This was the most powerful force derived from his golden mane, and in a short period of time, it crisscrossed the universe with unstoppable sword chi. Countless stars were cut to pieces by the sword chi, and at the same time, an endless aura of primal chaos was released from each of the mane which had turned into sword light. In the end, these flying manes converged in the sky to form a golden nine-headed lion which fiercely lunged at Wang Ling. This was a terrifying scene as the golden nine-headed lion displayed its kingly posture in the air. Wang Ling could see that this was the ability of a Dharma manifestation armament, which could only be used by extremely powerful eternal ones. Dharma manifestation armament. As the name implied, after summoning one's Dharma manifestation, it would be strengthened again through powerful means, such as putting on a layer of armor. At that moment, this nine-headed lion's Dharma manifestation was covered in the golden mane of the lion-headed man, and it was armed to the teeth. Each strand of the golden mane had turned into an extremely tough and peerless sword which was stuck into the nine-headed lion's body, completely covering it like a hedgehog. Seeing this scene, Wang Ling instantly understood. Since it was a sword, then it would be easy. Sword, come. At that moment, his mind stirred. He directly summoned Jinka. He slashed forward. In one move, the sword fell 1,000 feathers, and the golden nine-headed lion collapsed on the spot. Chapter 1817. When Jinka appeared, before he could launch a major attack, the golden nine-headed lion in space was stripped bare on the spot, and all its fur scattered in the air like a celestial maiden scattering flowers. How could this be? The lion man couldn't believe it. His Dharma idol armament had already been cultivated to the highest level, and was an extremely troublesome trump card for any of the ancient ones. But this youngster in front of him had directly neutralized it with a peachwood sword. What on earth was this peachwood sword? Staring at Jinka, the lion man tried to probe him with his spiritual senses, but it was blocked by an invisible barrier and then reflected back at him, directly hitting him in the face. Boom! It was a very powerful blow that shattered his nose on the spot and caused him to bleed profusely. How dare a mere earthling be so impudent? With a loud roar, he opened his mouth, and in the instant he raised his head, he multiplied. A huge lion head as heavy as a mountain spat out countless blades of light that cut through the air. This was the primordial void-rending slash, which combined spirit energy and primal chaos chi, and then blasted out the explosive energy directly from the lion man's mouth. Almost in the blink of an eye, the space in front of him was completely enveloped. With a loud roar, he opened his mouth, and in the instant he raised his head, he multiplied. A huge lion head as heavy as a mountain spat out countless blades of light that cut through the air. In a flash, the scene in front of Wang Ling was covered by countless blades of light. Like blades stabbing at Kushuan, these golden blades of light brushed past Wang Ling's clothes at an extremely fast speed. What surprised Wang Ling slightly was that version 3.0 of number 60 High's enlightened school uniform was actually torn in several places by this kind of attack. It looked like he would have to add a new version of the enchanted spell to the uniform. Wang Ling couldn't help sighing in his heart. It could only be said that this nine-headed lion was indeed a little stronger than he had thought. Previously, number 60 High's uniform had rarely been damaged. Hence, when Wang Ling was fighting an enemy, He had never thought of adding any kind of barrier to himself. After all, he had to give the other party a chance to see hope. If he gave himself 100 million layers of shields like lotus suns, this kind of visible despair would probably scare anyone away in an instant. Hence, Wang Ling had only worn this ugly and tattered uniform when he fought, and in the end, number 60 High's uniform had withstood the test every time. It had been a long time since the last time his school uniform was slashed. For Wang Ling, whether the school uniform was torn or not was a way to identify the strongest among the ancient ones. In order to protect his school uniform from further damage, Wang Ling held Jinka in his hand and split it into countless sword shadows in the air to contend with the blades of light that filled the sky. It was as if two meteor showers had collided, causing huge explosions in the universe. The battle had reached its climax. The lion-headed man roared, and his eyes were cold. When he opened his mouth, a pitch-black spear covered in strange spirit patterns shot out from his mouth. Like a dragon, the long spear was thousands of feet long and aimed directly at Wang Ling. This was the lion race's Lion Emperor Overlord Spear. This was a powerful weapon that had been passed down from generation to generation since the Lion clan had established themselves. Wang Ling was a little astonished to see the Lion Man brandish it in public. When all was said and done, Wang Ling was just a 17-year-old kid who hadn't seen a lot of things. Thus, he felt like he was visiting a museum for the first time when he saw many novel things. The Lion Emperor Overlord Spear was too long. The spear was like a dragon, piercing through from afar. The radius of the spear was at least 15 feet long. Everywhere it passed, the space would collapse. It directly caused the energy in the universe to explode, turning into a boiling ocean. Such a huge and astonishing momentum made Wang Ling realize that he had to take it seriously. Is he going to use that strange peachwood sword? The undead skeleton prince also watched this scene from a distance. In his heart, he hoped that the Lion Emperor's move would work. If he could defeat Wang Ling, his side would also be able to escape this abyss of suffering, and he wouldn't have to use his broken shield as an excuse to preserve his life. So at that moment, he looked in front of him out of the corner of his eye and determined that Wang Ling was likely to use that peachwood sword. But after thinking it over, Wang Ling just turned the blade and stabbed it into his back. Then, he took a deep breath and concentrated his strength on his index finger, pouring it all into a single point. When the bright red spirit power bubbled out of the youngster's index finger, Wang Ling used Immortal Guides the Way and aimed it at the giant Lion Emperor Overlord Spear. At this point, the undead skeleton prince and the Shi clan's Lion Man were dumbstruck by Wang Ling's maneuver. This was the Lion clan's Overlord Spear. The Lion clan's most powerful chaos weapon. A chaos weapon that had reached the 4th level of the light sequence. This youngster was actually only using his index finger to block it with pure physical strength. Was he still a normal human? Boom! The Lion Emperor Overlord Spear and Wang Ling's index finger collided, and in an instant, the sky exploded as the head of the Overlord Spear was directly destroyed by Wang Ling. The power of this index finger went straight for the yellow dragon, and fine cracks began to spread from the spearhead to the end of the spear, which was hundreds of feet long. At the same time, the Lion Man let out a blood-curdling scream. He spat out a mouthful of blood, blue veins popping out all over his body, and his face turned pale from the pain. As the Lion Emperor Overlord Spear completely collapsed, he couldn't withstand the tremendous destructive power of the backlash from this clan treasure at all. After tumbling in the void of space for a good while, he crawled up from the ground covered in blood. Although he hadn't died directly, the strength of the backlash just now had already made him realize that he was no longer able to resist Wang Ling. This Earth youngster was too terrifying. He wasn't just a mascot like the information had said at all. It was only then that the Lion Man realized what on earth had happened to this undead skeleton prince, who had been on the side breaking the shield the whole time. It turned out that he had known all along that he couldn't beat Wang Ling, which was why he had been slacking off here. At that moment, Wang Ling walked toward the Lion Man step by step with his hands in his trouser pockets, looking as relaxed as ever. His red eyes gave off an extremely strong sense of contempt, as if he didn't care about anything at all. The more the Lion Man looked at him, the more apprehensive he became. "I'm telling you, don't come over. If you have the guts, you can continue after we break the shield." He hurriedly took a few steps back and stood side by side next to the undead skeleton prince. Then, very skillfully, he pulled out his index finger and began to study how to break the shield together with the skeleton king. Wang Ling. This was already the second eternal one. Wang Ling really couldn't figure out why this group of people were so desperate to serve that holy king. What on earth had he promised these people? Now, there was only one left, right? At that moment, Wang Ling counted on his fingers. He had already used up 2 summoning opportunities on Raven's side, and he wondered what the last one would be like. Chapter 1818. The situation was worse than the Lion Man had imagined. Just a few breaths ago, he had been ridiculing this idiot skeleton prince of the undead for slacking off under the guise of breaking the shield. In the end, he had also touched it. It couldn't be helped. The main thing was that Wang Ling was too strong. He had complete control of the inner universe of the King's Eye, and possessed unparalleled might. His Lion Emperor Overlord Spear. It was a level 4 clan-guarding chaos magic treasure. It had been destroyed by this youngster with one finger. This was such terrifying strength that the Lion Man's scalp went numb for a moment. Thus, he had no choice but to settle for the next best thing, and use the same method as the skeleton prince of the undead. Otherwise, their lives would be in danger. Moreover, both of them were extremely worried about what they would do if the shield was destroyed by them in the end. Hence, they tacitly went easy on each other. It looked like they were working hard to break the shield, but in fact they were just slacking off. What should we do? At that moment, the 2 ancient beings trapped in the inner universe of the King's Eye were pondering the same question. They didn't remember what their original mission was at all. The Holy Venerate sent by the Holy King had asked them to find the expert hidden in number 60 high and bring his soul back. They were to plant a magic treasure similar to a parasitic seed in his body so that it could control his body. Before they had been sent here, both of them had been full of confidence that they were up to the task this time. After all, one of them was a prince of the undead, and the other was the current leader of the Lion Clan. Although these 2 clans no longer had any other clansmen, they had both inherited the royal bloodline. With the power of this bloodline, on paper, they were much stronger than most of the ancient beings. They could instantly kill most of the skeletons in the Supreme Corpse winding up diagram. Naturally, dealing with the Blood Lotus female butcher who had defeated Householder's sea demon wouldn't be a problem either. But while their plan was good, it was very difficult to carry it out. It was like the product departments of some companies who always came up with unrealistic ideas and fancy operations. Programmers often pulled their hair out when they carried out their tasks. Another example was the withered authors who yelled all day that they wanted to add more chapters. Before they started writing, they confidently said that they would turn the world upside down, but when it came time to write, the world made them obedient. As it turned out, there was always a difference between ideas and practice. In fact, Wang Ling hadn't expected the 2 ancient beings of the royal bloodline to be so afraid of him. But what did they say? That they could cut through his school uniform. He had to give them credit where it was due. From the beginning, he hadn't intended to kill these 2 people. After all, they were descendants of the royal family, and all of them were ancient ones. They knew as much as Li Xian and Zhang Zizi. So from the very beginning, his goal had been to capture the 2 of them alive like pet elves, then lock them up in the corpse picture for domestication. The primordial ones were the oldest branch of human cultivation civilization. Since Dao ancestor Wang intended to preserve them, he must have his own reasons. Furthermore, Wang Ling firmly believed that in the end he would have to start with these ancient ones when it came to creating a talisman that could limit the energy in his body once and for all. Prince of them was, of that of Wang, Emperor of Gu He of Wang. Prince of, in the world of the Venerate would gradually adapt to modern cultivation civilization under certain constraints, and in the end, turn them into his own power in case of an emergency. This was like creating a game world. Wang Ling could be the main god of this game world, and let the venerate build their own homes, establish their own sects, and revive the glory of their clan back then. Finally, the benefits would be distributed according to how much each venerate contributed to this world. In any case, Wang Zhibao had an inexhaustible supply of magic treasures, and any one of them would be enough for the venerate to fight over. So, under the premise of a clear system, the benefits would be distributed according to how much they contributed, and no one would have any objections. But Wang Ling also knew that it wouldn't be easy to realize this idea. First of all, he had to establish a trustworthy management team with him as the core, which would have prestige among the venerate. Li Xian and Zhang Ziqin were his trusted aides, so they were naturally his first choice. But it would be hard to intimidate them with just their strength. Thus, he needed descendants of the royal family like the Skeleton Prince and the Lion Man in front of him to play supporting roles. But just 2 descendants of the royal family seemed a little lacking, so he just needed to poach all the venerate on Holy King's side. After 2 rounds of duels, Wang Ling realized that Holy King seemed to have a hobby of collecting descendants of the royal family, and that 2 venerate in a row were members of the royal family. Then, who would be the third person to arrive? Wang Ling was very curious. Following his previous routine, Wang Ling temporarily lifted the time-stop effect. When Madame Raven saw that Wang Ling still had his face buried in his knees on the monitor screen, she almost went crazy. Why is this person still squatting in there and acting cute? Why isn't there any reaction at all when she presses the remote control? Damn, this button isn't fake, right? Didn't they say they would send strong reinforcements? Why isn't there any reaction at all? Can anyone control this person? She only had one last chance to press the button, but her fingers couldn't help moving. In a very short period of time, she pressed the button countless times with "kidda" sounds. Then, the time-stop effect was activated again, because Wang Ling could sense that a third venerate had arrived. Just as he had thought, this venerate really did have the royal bloodline. This was beyond Wang Ling's expectations. The third venerate was a female venerate. Dressed in a gorgeous glass robe, she looked like a fairy of the 9th heaven who had descended from the heavens as she appeared in front of Wang Ling with countless 7-colored petals. It's actually Meng Lioli. The undead Skeleton Prince and the Lion Man were both shocked the moment the woman appeared. They had never expected Meng Lioli, the famous dream manipulator among the venerates, to actually serve the Holy King. Unlike the Skeleton Prince and the Lion Man, after realizing that she had been sucked into the king's eye's internal space, this woman called Meng Lioli wasn't in a hurry to make a move. Instead, she fixed her gaze on Wang Ling and said, "You're actually willing to put so many shields on that girl outside. She must be very important to you, whether you want to admit it or not." She looked at Wang Ling, then changed her face to look like Lotus Sunday. "Shields are ineffective against me." Meng Lioli smiled. "Right now, I am her. She is me. If you hit me, all the pain and injuries will be concentrated on that girl." Chapter 1819. An illusion spell? Wang Ling frowned slightly. Or rather, this wasn't a simple illusion spell, but a clone spell that was very similar to a real clone, except that the target wasn't the caster, but a designated person. Meng Lioli knew that Wang Ling wouldn't be easy to deal with, so she had extracted some of Lotus Sun's spirit energy, and then used a super strong imitation ability to quickly assimilate the spirit energy surging through her body with Lotus Sun's spirit energy to form a shell around her body. In this way, she had taken on Lotus Sun's appearance. This was a brilliant spell technique, which Meng Lioli called Moonlight Knight's Oath, or Knight's Oath for short. It was an extremely brilliant technique that involved the assimilation of soul, clone, and spirit energy at the same time, and could only be done by an ancient being who was completely proficient in this type of spell. The most important thing was that by doing this, one could indeed ignore the influence of the external shield, and directly start to break down from the inside. Meng Lioli was full of confidence in the method she had used. She had come to rescue the Skeleton Prince and the Lion Man, but after threatening Wang Ling, she looked at the 2 people behind her out of the corner of her eye and saw that they were still focused on breaking the shield, as if they had already completely given up on resisting. She even received disdainful taunts from the skeleton prince and the lion man out of the corner of their eyes. They mocked Meng Liuli for being too young. They didn't understand how dangerous the youngster in front of them was. The look in their eyes was clearly telling her that these techniques were child's play in front of Wang Ling, and that she should quickly give up on resisting and stop struggling pointlessly. At that moment, Meng Liuli grit her teeth, summoned a glass dagger, and stared at Wang Ling. As the princess of the Dream Clan, today I will show you my power. Wang Ling. Despite her arrogance, Wang Ling could tell that the glass dagger she had summoned wasn't a dagger to stab him, but a dagger that Meng Liuli had used to come from Remnant. After this miraculous assimilation was completed, all the pain would be reflected back on Lotus Sun, so Meng Liuli naturally wasn't afraid of getting hurt. The next moment, she clenched her teeth, grabbed the hilt of the dagger, and stabbed it deep into her thigh. Meng Liuli couldn't wait to see Lotus Sun's pained expression. She imagined the moment she stabbed her knife in, blood spurting out of Lotus Sun's slender, snow-white thigh. However, it turned out that she was thinking too much. As soon as the knife stabbed down, the lion-headed man on the back let out a heart-wrenching scream. A clear cut appeared on the lion-headed man's leg where the shield had been broken. A glazed light seeped through the wound and went straight through the meridians, continuously destroying the insides of the lion-headed man. "Ah, you're such a self-righteous person." The lion man roared with a pained expression, and the profanities he cursed turned into asterisks as if he was sending a telegram. Only now did Meng Liuli realize that Lotus Sun, who had signed the Moonlight Knight's oath with her, had turned into a lion's head. Had it been transferred? Meng Liuli immediately realized that the injury had been transferred. After she and Lotus Sun had signed the assimilation contract, an external force had helped Lotus Sun and the lion-headed man carry out a second assimilation contract, which was why it was actually the lion-headed man who had been injured when Meng Liuli stabbed him. And the only person present who could do this was the youngster in front of her. Meng Liuli was shocked. The spell she had been studying for so long had actually been directly learned by the other party in just a few short moments, and it seemed that he was even more proficient than she was. After he had seen through the Moonlight Knight's oath, Meng Liuli realized that there was no point in continuing to use this move. No wonder the two kings of the Ancient Ones had looked at her like that. There was indeed something strange about this Earth youngster, and he wouldn't be easy to deal with. Threatening him head-on wouldn't work, and Meng Liuli felt that if she wanted to tame this youngster, she had to use some other methods. Thus, after dispelling the effects of the Moonlight Knight's oath spell, Meng Liuli raised both hands at Wang Ling and slowly walked toward him. In a tender voice, she said, "This little brother? I, the princess of the Dream Clan, will never listen to anyone. You're very strong. Do you want to join me in reviving the royal clan? I'm willing to be yours." She said this to Wang Ling with sincerity. Failing to threaten him, Meng Liuli could only sell him something else. Furthermore, she had always believed that this move would definitely work on Wang Ling. When all was said and done, he was a hot-blooded youngster. No normal man would be able to withstand this kind of attack. As she walked toward Wang Ling, she untied her belt so that her fair skin was faintly discernible under the transparent glass robe. The blood on the lion-headed man's leg hadn't stopped yet, and instantly surged even more violently. However, the expression on Wang Ling's face didn't change at all. It was true that he was a hot-blooded youngster, but that didn't mean that he would be in front of Meng Liuli. As the princess of the Dream Clan, Meng Liuli was naturally a very beautiful woman. Graceful and beautiful, she was like a dazzling seven-colored gem. She still maintained her youthful appearance. This kind of appearance was like that of a goddess who had walked out of a painting. Any man could only describe it as pleasing to the eye. Unfortunately, Meng Liuli's appearance couldn't be maintained if Wang Ling used the slightest bit of his power of sight. Although Meng Liuli had tried her best to maintain her appearance with all kinds of beauty-preserving spells and elixirs, in Wang Ling's eyes, as long as the king's eye was active, she would look like an old woman who had lived through the ages. At that moment, Meng Liuli, who was gracefully walking toward Wang Ling in the eyes of the skeleton prince and the lion-headed man, was an old woman with loose skin, a face full of age spots, and a face full of wrinkles. It wasn't that Wang Ling hadn't seen beautiful girls before, but he certainly wasn't that hot-blooded in the face of an old woman. Thus, he didn't say anything, and only took out his enchanted phone. After casting a spell of the king's eye, he took a picture of Meng Liuli's true appearance. Wang Ling knew that it might be a little cruel for a woman to do this, but people always had to face their truest selves. Without another word, he directly used the king's eye to launch a spiritual spell visual projection and projected the image of Meng Liuli he had just taken into the air. This was a public execution of Meng Liuli, and at that moment, it was very clear. Meng Liuli couldn't take it anymore. The corners of her mouth twitched as she stared at the aged face projected in the air, and her expression instantly changed. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.